Welcome to Stoic and Steel. My name is Payden Underwood. Here at Stoic and Steel, we are trading paradigms through trades, impacting future generations by living intentionally with faith, family, finances, and fitness. And what is it all worth if you're not enjoying yourself? So it must be fulfilling. Today, we have Joel Stortro, and I was reading a book the other day, and it's for men, 7 Landmines of Manhood by Keith Jenkins. It's a great field guide for if you're on mission or not. And here's a few signs that you're on false mission. That you're exhausted, but you can't stop what you're doing. You've succeeded, but you still feel empty. You care more about optics than obedience. You feel like a fraud if you're not performing, and you're afraid to stop moving because you don't know who you'd be without the mission. I think those are just good litmus tests to see where you're going in the direction of your life. I haven't finished the book, but I'll probably share the 7 landmines with you guys. So yeah, enjoy that. Joel Stortro, you're a son, a husband, a father of 3, and you're a nurse turned nurse practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And you've spent 15 years in the emergency room to now running your own clinic.
Yes.
What is your story?
Oh man, you just unpacked so much right there. It's like, where do you start, right?
Yeah.
It's so good, so good. You know, I think stories really do start at the beginning. So I loved it when you were prepping me for this. My story really starts when I was born. Born to parents that knew they were going to go to the mission field. So they were really just waiting for me to be born. And then when I was 2 months old, they took me to Zambia as a 2-month-old to start as missionaries working for Africa Evangelical Fellowship, doing radio broadcasting there.
Yeah.
So, I don't remember those years, but I hear lots of stories about when we were in Zambia. We were there for about 2 years, and then we moved to Swaziland, and then we moved to South Africa during apartheid. So that was just a crazy, amazing experience as a white American, right? So very racial with apartheid, because in that culture and in that setting, obviously, they felt like color mattered, which it doesn't. But I came in even as a white American, still in kind of that white class, but still between British and Afrikaans who were at war with each other too. Mm-hmm. So here you go. You've got all these different classes in that system struggling to make their own individual way. And then I come in as a kid, American, and didn't fit into really either white class either. Was really an interesting time to learn. So, but we got to do that and then go back to Swaziland. Took us to Guam. So I used to say I was more African Asian than I was American.
Yeah.
Because the truth was I in those first 21 years of my life, I probably had been in the United States because we had come back for to raise funds with our supporters to report what we've been doing and then to continue to raise funds so we could be over there. I've probably been in the States a total of maybe 4 years.
Wow.
So I was American, but I really didn't know my people.
Yeah. It was 4 years broken up.
Every 3 years we'd come back for either 6 to 8 months.
Just to remain, to keep citizenship.
Yes, keep citizenship, but also then to check back in with our supporters.
Yeah.
So my parents were supported by lots of different churches in the Pacific Northwest. And so then I remember as a kid just going around to each of these churches and having to stand up in front of the church while my parents presented what we'd been doing and ways that people could continue to pray for us, continue to support the ministry that they were involved in.
Yeah.
So very much interesting because it was very much kind of a performance-based thing that I learned early on. It was like, hey, when you come back to the States, you have to look this way, you have to act this way. And then, by the way, you have to go in front of all these people all the time that you don't know.
Yeah.
Quite an interesting...
As a young kid.
Yeah. I did well with it. My siblings did not. I think that some of that really shaped the way they ended up living their lives.
Yeah. How many siblings do you have?
So I have a younger brother and younger sister.
Okay.
Yeah. My younger brother ended up staying in Guam. In fact, struggled with. He's really struggled with his relationship with the Lord. I think ever since a teenager, kind of had to find his own way. Got into kind of opportunity to be an illusionist. So he had his own magic show that people would fly to Guam from Japan and other places just to come see. So he did pretty well for himself, but then kind of got COVID hit, he got out of that scene. Just kind of struggled to find his way.
How was that overcoming the performance aspect?
Yeah.
Did that carry along into adulthood with your relationship with God? That you had to perform to be worthy
Hmm.
in that sense?
Such a good question. And I like what you're asking because I really think to an extent we all struggle with performance, whether it's being liked by the fear man, right,
Yeah.
or it's internally. So for me, I'm an achiever, right? So performance hit me in a different way because I was already wired to achieve. I think we all are to an extent, but I really embraced that early on. I love school. I love new experiences. Nothing that we did really phased me because I wanted to live life to the fullest. So it was my opportunity to do that. I think
Yeah.
God put me where I needed to be and helped me learn to succeed no matter where we were at. And I liked to perform. So I would say I didn't notice any negative things from that really until I became an adult.
Hmm.
And that's when I all of a sudden as an adult, I didn't hit the mark or I didn't have the relationship credit and I missed the mark and all of a sudden it didn't whatever I was doing didn't go well.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I did struggle a little bit from that perspective. But then I think as my relationship with God deepened, I began to see that he cared less about my performance than he did about my actual heart towards him.
Yeah.
And so that was been a process for probably for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
God wooing me away from my need to achieve and perform to needing really to sit in front of him and spend time with him and have him direct my day.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd say the last 15 years have been about.
I love that.
Learning to not be performance from my own strength or my own direction
Yeah.
to, God, what do you want me to do today? And what's the wild adventure you have? Because each day is a wild adventure if we choose to embrace it that way.
You have several degrees. Were those degrees searching through your own power and what you wanted to find? Describe
Wow.
why you have so many degrees and where you're at and how you found nursing.
Yeah. That's such a good question. And it's funny because every time we have a chance to tell our story, we almost, in a sense, get to tell on ourselves from a fresh perspective.
Yeah, looking back.
And so I've never really looked at it from the achievement performance perspective, like you're saying. But the reality is I love learning. So
Yeah.
I think for me, each time I got a degree was a step in the direction that I thought God was leading me.
Yeah.
And um, and oftentimes those steps don't always pay out in the way you think, but I believe God always brings it full circle. So like even with my missionary growing up kid experience, I don't get a chance to talk about it very much because I'm now 20 some years past that it's a part of my life I don't really talk about, but I'm always curious how's God going to bring it back up because
Mhm.
I believe that there was purpose with that. So same way with these degrees. First degree, it's kind of like how do you choose your career? How do you choose what is it God wants me to do? What am I supposed to do in life, right? And I
Yeah.
think that question comes in high school. And I remember I did really, really well at school. So for me, it was like I knew I could do whatever I wanted. So then it became, well, what is it that I'm good at that I like to do? And I knew I liked science. And I knew I liked math. So I figured, and I also liked living overseas as a missionary kid. I was like, let's keep doing this. So
Yeah.
let's be a missionary doctor. So in high school, I said that. I Not out of a ton of real experience because it wasn't like I was around very many doctors. There were some around. I think probably more from maybe my dad's interests. So I'll tell you, my dad was a missionary. He loved radio. He loved magic, which is interesting that my brother ended up becoming a professional magician,
Magician.
illusionist.
Yeah.
He loved stopping at every accident. In Africa, it took forever for emergency services to get there. So if there's a car accident or any medical emergency, he would stop. Not that he was necessarily trained a lot in it. He just done a lot of reading and knew that he had information that may help. So maybe that plus what I saw was like, hey, let's become a doctor.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what started me with the biology degree that I got first. And then I came back to the States and got a master's in pastoral studies. I really wanted to do 1 year of Bible at Multnomah Biblical Seminary
Yeah.
because I wanted to be a missionary doctor. So that year I was applying to medical schools, and then also God happened to drop into my interest zone, the woman who would be my wife at that time
Yeah.
too. Um, so I did the 1 year graduate program, got my graduate certificate in Bible. applied to medical schools, didn't really get any, didn't make the headway I was looking for with medical schools. So I figured let's pause that. And then at the same time, the woman who became my wife now for 26 years came into my life, and so it really brought this kind of decision making. Do I really, really, really want to push through again and try again to apply to medical school, or has got to have something different? And I decided that he had something different. I felt like, medical school that interest needed to just go back on the shelf, and that he had for me to marry my wife, which talk
Best
about
decision.
adventures, right?
Yeah.
Incredible blessings, but incredible adventures too. Like my life has taken on so many different directions as a result of who God brought into my life, right? And I think that's true for all of us. If he brings us together for a reason and a purpose, and we can't always see it. In fact, I know I didn't see what I had in my wife when I married her. I just saw a woman that I was incredibly attracted to, loved hanging out, and would be my friend. And then I thought I could do life together. But when you're 20, you don't know really anything.
Yeah.
26 years later, I marvel at what God's done and how he's blended us together, and how he's used what she was interested in and what she saw in me to put me in the direction where I'm supposed to help put me where I'm supposed to be.
Introduce your wife.
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife, Sarah, man, she is incredible. I met her when she was in the at Bible school. They're getting a youth ministry degree. So she thought that her interest was to be kind of like a youth pastor.
Yeah.
So once she graduated, we tried to knocked on a number of different doors trying to get into a church to become youth pastors. They didn't open up. So then she ended up trying a lot of different things. She's a coached swim team for Valley Catholic here, for high school team for a while. And then ended up just being a mom for a while. And then we worked together on a nutrition business.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But just being a mom, I shouldn't say just because
that's
the
a big
reality
job.
is come on now, that is
That's the most
it's
important
huge your
one.
job. Yes.
Yeah.
And honestly, our family and my kids wouldn't be where they are today if she hadn't done what she did. And she was amazing, poured into them, helped direct, really helped put me in line too at times. I think together we figured out how to parent. She had one paradigm, I had one paradigm, and we had to figure out how to blend that together and what that looked like. And so I think our last kid got the best of us.
As
they always do. My first one, we learned the hard way, and she's turned out really, really well. She's an amazing, amazing young woman. And I would say, I've done a little bit of my part. There's areas where if I could go back, I'd do some things. I'd do more things.
Yeah.
But my wife really shaped who she is, and so she gets the credit for working with Holy Spirit, working with God on that one.
Yeah. I think there's an extra grace on the firstborns. That's
Amen.
Being a firstborn.
Yes.
Yeah.
And me too.
Yeah.
I was firstborn. My wife's a firstborn.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's funny. What was nursing college looking like?
Good question.
Yeah.
I totally left that out. Well, it's interesting because so right, everything kind of went on pause because I really felt like there was, for me, a tension of like, if I'm going to get married, I want to invest in my marriage, and going to medical school was almost like getting married to medical school. I mean, what else do you do in your life but study and learn and try to just hope your relationship stay in place while you're doing that?
Yeah.
And so I put that all on pause, and I ended up was working at a restaurant, did restaurant business for 7 years in the first years of our marriage. And that was really good. It taught me about people.
Yeah.
And God had a purpose in that because, I grew up overseas, and so I wasn't comfortable here in the United States. And he took me on a journey, which then came
so
into
good.
the ER, which I will get to in a second.
Yeah.
But where I had to begin to understand my own people and had to begin to love them. If he was going to keep me here, I had to learn to love my own people because I loved other people.
Yeah.
Right? It was the whole thing where it's like I was more comfortable out of my own country than I was in my own country. So restaurant business helped me learn a little bit of that because all you're doing is working with people.
And serving them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which was so good. But in the middle of that, we got to this point where it was like we had one child, and how are we going to make ends meet? And the restaurant business was great, but it really wasn't where we wanted. And God kind of re-sparked that desire for the medical field again.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody said to me, and I don't know who, because I'd love to give them credit for it. It might be my wife. And she probably had to say it to me multiple times because I have my own ideas, pretty strong in my own ideas. I'm learning to listen better now, but then she must have said it to me a number of times. And finally it landed on me. Why don't you try nursing school? And I'm like, I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
And and in one of your questions before this, you asked, what is one thing I do differently? Man, I would go to nursing school so much sooner than I did.
Oh, really?
Because when I went to nursing school, I was working full time, married, had my youngest who was probably 1 or 2, and my second was on the way. And I went to nursing school full time as well.
Yeah.
Um, and the grace of God was on it. Like
Yeah.
it was the easiest schooling I've ever done.
Really?
Not because it's easy, but because God made me to do it. It was
Yeah.
like I finally found where I fit in.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, this makes so much sense. Like wow, can do this and I love this.
Mhm.
So the nursing school went through, got my bachelor's of science in nursing, and then God just opened up. The first job was in the ER.
Yeah.
And again, education on how to love my own people.
What are some major differences from the African culture, people outside to the American culture?
Man, that's a good question. So and probably the best way for me to answer it is every time I'd be overseas and they knew that I was an American, they would say, "Hey, so you Americans always have these big cars, big houses, live essentially in the land of luxury."
Yeah.
Is the perspective overseas, and especially in third world countries, because that's all they see. All the popular music and the movies, all this stuff highlights some of the best parts of our country,
Mhm.
and really glosses over the fact that there is still quite a huge disparity in the sense of those that have and those that don't really struggle,
Yeah.
right? And I think so but some of the differences overseas different. That was their perspective, and I didn't really have a great way of combating that because I didn't know.
A lot of your understanding was of movies and things of that nature of the American culture,
Yeah,
right?
and
Yeah.
even then, most of my stuff was outdated because overseas you wouldn't get it right away,
Yeah.
especially back then in the in the late 70s or in 80s.
Yeah.
Everything that I knew was like 20 years old. So it's crazy.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
then you come back to America and you're referencing 20-year-old things.
Yes. People are like, "Where did
Yeah.
you get that from? That is not current."
Yeah. That's funny.
But overseas, though, I learned family. Like African culture has an incredible joy.
Mm.
So every culture, and I've learned this about the different people groups, they all have identifying features that are just incredible, and it comes through a number of different things. But Africans in general, especially when you're out in the tribal areas, have so little, right? It's mud huts, everybody's sleeping in the same room, just so different than our experience. But yet they're incredibly grateful. And when they're given a chance to just express their joy, they're almost overjoyous in comparison to their situation,
Yeah.
which is way different than what I ever experienced when I was a child here in the United States. And so I was drawn to that. Plus, they have a strong family sense because they depend on it. Like you don't survive unless your family survives.
Yeah.
So way different than our experience necessarily here
Yeah.
for the average American.
Yeah. Less individualism and more community based where
Totally.
you are, I would imagine, vulnerable and you're known and finding joy within being known from that perspective.
Yes.
I would
Yes.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. Huge.
Instead of finding what we think joy is in our things and bigger meals and this, that, and the other, right?
Yeah, which there's a place for that too. You don't know anything different. It's like, well, so joy looks different over there because circumstances are way different. So
Hmm.
so then it's what does joy look like here, right?
Yeah.
And how does that fit into what we've been given and how do we figure that out? Because that's really what we're called to do. If we're called to live here, then and this is where we are, then how do we live to our fullest in that environment too?
What would be your answer in that?
So I wouldn't have had any clue 20 years ago,
Yeah.
but I feel like now I've lived more in the United States than I have overseas.
Hmm.
My passion for overseas is still there. I love it.
Yeah.
But my passion for here has grown a ton. I'd honestly say we should have the rest of the world. The mission field is America. Bring the rest of the world here. We need help.
Yeah.
And we need to see a fresh perspective. But how do we have joy here? And I think for me, some of the disciplines that I've learned is I need to go back to the garden on a daily basis. And for me, the garden is where I spend time with God. So it can be whatever it is for you. I think we in our individual lives, in the busyness and hustle and bustle of our culture, have to find ways to intentionally spend time in a way that makes sense for us. Oftentimes we think, opening God's word and spending time in prayer, and it's true, that's what we need to do, but He wants to commune with us where we want to commune with Him. And so oftentimes, for myself, I love time in the garden. And for other people, it may be time in wherever they're at. But you invite God into that time with you. You open up His word, you spend time with Him, and then you find yourself all of a sudden just talking to Him about your concerns, talking to Him about your friends, talking to Him about your family, talking to Him, and it becomes this relationship that becomes so real in that space, right? And then it's how do you let that invade the rest of your life, um, that quiet space to your busy life? How do you bring that in the rest?
Yeah.
And it's in that I find the joy, because the joy then comes in being in His presence and knowing who you are, and then doing, like back to your point, doing the mission He put in you.
Yeah.
Joy comes from those things, because what you learn is Father God is so proud of who you are, and when you are doing the things that He made you to do, He can't but help not just being on the sidelines clapping at what you're doing, but being in your life clapping what you're doing, and that's real joy.
Yeah. Impacting the people around you and
Yes.
being a light to the rest of the world in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Easy to get wrapped up in the noise here. The adage of what is noise and what is signal. And if you can focus on the signal more than the noise,
Yeah.
then you'll be propelled in the right direction. If you can
Ooh.
quiet down and find the signal of where you're going. I've heard several CEOs talk about the noise or the signal, and just focus on the signal and staying in
Yes.
that. And picking your schooling for
Mm.
nursing school, what was your deciding factors in that for picking the school that you did? There's several courses that I know, or schooling options, where you can get BSNs fairly quickly within 18 months, I believe, through different
Yeah.
accelerated programs to a 4-year program through universities and things of that nature. What routes did you go, and why did you pick that?
It's such a good question, and I think what I did is probably a little less relative to what's available now. So when I went, the the online schooling was just kind of starting to become a little more popular, but it wasn't there yet. Accreditation wasn't quite there. So and then also because I'd already had a bachelor's and a master's, I was able to do an accelerated program. Thankfully, because God prompted me to do this before my credits expired, before I had to renew anything.
You're 7 years there.
Yeah, it was just I was right on the mark there, and so I was in a desperate need to get accepted, so I didn't have to go back to do more schooling, just to start nursing school. So I applied to a bunch of the different 4-year schools in the area, and really it came down to the one that accepted me. And in fact, even that was just miraculous, because it was kind of
Yeah.
like, God, I'll obeying you, and I'm gonna throw everything out what you've got that I know out here, and then if something sticks, then I know this is your plan. And I remember I got on the waiting list with the University of Portland, which was one of the schools I applied to. I didn't really have a preference. Um, which is interesting, because I think along the line I've learned to have a preference, but then I was just kind of, okay, God, I'm obeying you, throwing it out there.
Yeah.
And so on the waiting list, and then I remember it was like right before Christmas, they called me and said, "Spot just opened up. You ready to go in January?" I was like, "Okay, let's
Yeah.
do
Let's
this."
saddle up.
And it wasn't my first choice, because that school was expensive, but it was the only one that opened up.
Mhm.
And so I just stepped through that door knowing, okay, God, there's gonna be a lot of debt here, but this is what you've opened up. So let's take that faith step.
Yeah.
And back then there weren't as many choices. So so it's not to say that I don't value the other routes. In fact, I would probably these days encourage the other routes, especially if you're already working, especially if you've already got some experience going. Those other routes are really, really handy, because that's what I ended up doing for nurse practitioners. I ended up doing an online school, working full time here during COVID while running the hospital from the COVID perspective. Um, went back to school online at a Christian college that I chose that had an online program, and eh, and that was amazing. It was exactly what I needed. So
Yeah.
I think all the options out there get you to the end goal. I think part of my decision making now would be kind of looking at the long term. How much debt do you really want to incur? How much can you afford it from what you're seeing, right? I think
Hmm.
that's an important piece to ask. N- uh, Not being afraid of the debt, because nurses get paid really, really well. So you'll be able to pay it off,
Yeah.
especially if you use wisdom in that once you finish.
Go in that further. Thankfully, I was very fortunate I didn't need to take out student loans. What does that look like for someone who is going down that route
Yeah.
for student loans? What would you say to look out for or not do, or what to do in that
Yeah.
scenario?
There's a lot of considerations. I like what you're saying, because when it comes to taking out loans, I mean, so you can look at it from how much money do you need to live is one of the parts, right? How much money then do you need for, right? That would be for like room and board, and for, so for a roof over your head, and for food, right? And for basic living necessities.
Asking for a loan for those things.
If you need it,
If you
right? I mean, I
okay.
think I think you have to look at the full picture, because they're going to ask you that.
Hmm.
What are you going to need in order to make this educational experience the one you need, right?
Yeah.
Are you capable of working? Do you have a job that you can work while you're doing the schooling or not, right? Does that work in with your school or not? And if not, then there is always, and they're willing to loan you the money. So I think those are considerations. About how, and that all plays into how much you end up taking out. So those are all options.
Yeah.
I've always, because you could hear I had family and all these other things. It was always like, how do I maximize what I'm doing, yet give my best to each of the things that I'm doing, and still provide. And God always, yeah, I'm always amazed. I was able to let me get a loan out that worked, and then we found a way to start paying it later on. So
Yeah.
I've always kind of had this walk by faith. Um, and a little uncomfortable steps
Yeah.
because of those. But if you don't have to do those, I would just take out the minimum that you need, knowing, because they give you the information on what tuition costs, how much books are going to cost. And then, so if that's all you need, get that out. If you need more for living expenses, then get that out, because if you get into nursing, you have a career that, well, there's always going to be a job. And they always pay.
In nursing school, are you able to work? I know I've interviewed veterinarians as they're going through their rounds. It's difficult to go through medical school and also pay for the things you need to
Yes.
pay for. Would you say that a student would be able to work a different job while doing clinical rounds or things of that nature in nursing school?
So that's such a good question. And this is where I think godly wisdom is so important, because earthly wisdom so often tells you your limitations.
Mm,
I'm not a guy that tends to believe in limitations. God has had me test a lot of things. So my story is not always the common story,
yeah,
because I already shared with nursing school. I worked full time at a restaurant.
yeah,
Um, and luckily with the restaurants, they're open all hours, right? So you can adjust your schedule depending on what your clinicals are. So, and my manager was willing to work with me. So I worked full time, went to school full time, and did nursing school through that. I also did nurse practitioner school with all the clinicals full time as well. But God had me in this spot where there was favor, and my bosses were willing to work with me,
yeah,
and so we made it work.
yeah.
So I guess from that perspective, that's always an option. It may not always be the best option. The other part is God, and this is part of the surrendering and learning to live with Him process, um, especially with nurse practitioner school. Really, really hard. One of the hardest things I've done. Um, I had to still work, and I still needed to spend time with my family. I couldn't completely lose my family,
Yeah,
although it was tough. It was
yeah,
tough, and my wife would say, "Never again."
yeah.
We had a lot
Glad
of
you're on the other side.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
and even in the middle of it, there was just a lot of tension of, "It feels like you're married to school and not me,"
yeah,
which, man, it hurt. That hurts, because that
yeah.
was never my intention, but I got myself I was obedient, and I found myself in that spot. But I began to learn that we could do more with less. And this is
Mm,
such a huge principle, and I wish
yeah,
people would catch it early on. When we when we give our day to God, on a daily basis, and we absolutely trust that he's put everything in place that we need for that day, then even when the day doesn't look the way you think it should, it always works out. And so I began to test that with nursing with my nurse practitioner school. God, I'm looking at my day. I've got 2 hours. I'll wake up really early, 4 o'clock. I've got from 4 o'clock to 6:30. This is all the work I've got to get done. Here you go. And then I
Yeah.
go and do it. And for the most part, he would help me get it done. So I can't say that I'm that smart. What I can say is he's that good.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
because I don't necessarily believe that I'm that smart. What what I'm saying is when you commit to that, God honors that. And he came through. Even when there's times where it was like, okay, this isn't working out. Somehow in my schedule, something else would open up and we'd get it done. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, thank you, God.
Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. And I think that's the point.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's so good just to surrender daily in that with what you have going on. What were some ways that through nurse practitioner school you alluded to the difficulties in it? What were some ways that you were intentional with your
Mm,
family at that time?
yeah.
Your kids were all in the house at that time or
Uh, yeah. I think my daughter was just about she was already away at college. So it was just the two boys.
okay.
So it's crazy what when you surrender, it's crazy because now that you're asking me to think about it, I'm thinking all the different things that he had me do. So I tried really hard to commit to doing a date once a week with my wife. I'll tell you, I failed more often than not.
Yeah.
And and there's reasons why I failed. Um, Mostly through my own inadequacy. I either wasn't clear enough in what I had needed, or I wasn't. I wasn't. I was still learning to give control a little bit over of my day. I had these thoughts. So that was one of the goals was that, and then quarterly getaways with my wife, which I failed at more often than I succeeded. But that was kind of the goal,
Hmm.
and it's something we're continuing to do. Um, and then we learned to find in the rhythms of the day that if I would spend, 30 minutes wherever I could, and just let her talk, kind of just to catch up with her, kind of connect with her, was hugely important. I'll tell you, my wife though was the one that sacrificed the most because I spend more time usually with her than I did, so I unintentionally cut out more time with her. But then with both of my kids, I was very, very intentional, especially my youngest. I ended up coaching, go figure, go to school, and then I ended up coaching most of his youth sports too.
Yeah.
So so I was with him all the time. I mean, we went to all state stuff for football. We went to Texas and Las Vegas, and I helped coach on his teams. And so my life was kind of like I would school in the morning, go to work, and then I'd go do youth sports events at night. And then once a week, I would really work hard to try to do a date with my wife, on a daily basis, trying to talk with her.
Hmm.
Um, and that was kind of the rhythm of my life for
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah. The dates with your wife, being in several
Yeah.
men's groups where I get to see guys that are married and how they have been successful in their marriage. Oftentimes, in my mind, thinking, oh, you'd have to make a date be very elaborate and
Mm,
this big grandiose thing where really a date now looking at it I go well you could just popcorn and a movie or popcorn spending that intentional conversational time
yeah.
maybe not a movie's the best thing something where you both can talk just a dinner that is simple. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be knocking the socks off of them all the time, but
Yeah.
there's a place and time for that in the quarterly aspect of things. Did you
Wow.
find that the simpler it could be the more depth you would have?
I think you're hitting something so important, and I'm maybe just even realizing that too. We often over romanticize and over. It's in our hearts to want to do grandiose all the time,
Yeah.
but in the commonplace, the simple rhythms of our lives, I agree with you. It doesn't always fit, and so I think as men, I did this too. Put so much pressure on myself
Hmm.
that I was already working and performing so high at so many other areas of my life that I would often feel like I was failing at that area because I put such high expectations on it with the let's make this something huge. And there's so many factors that go into making something huge that I do think as men we need to just allow ourselves to find something in a simplicity of our lives, which honestly, a coffee, just taking time, going to get coffee and taking time th- to connect hearts. I honestly
Yeah.
think the biggest piece is just giving space to either just be with, because sometimes you do, sometimes you don't want to talk. Sometimes your wife doesn't want to talk. Your girlfriend, whoever you're pouring your interest out on. Sometimes it's just sometimes it's okay just to be. And so if it's like movies you like, that's great. But I think you got to mix in those opportunities where you're intentionally, like we're doing here,
Yeah.
asking questions and seeking to know and
Yeah.
seeking to be known, right?
Yeah.
That's the relationship building aspect
Yeah.
that will last a lifetime. And
Yeah.
if you don't do that, that's where the problems come. Because if we don't connect heart to heart, doubts, assumptions start to ruin everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to
I've
get those weeds out.
I've seen that firsthand in my marriage. They're my first marriage, and I was so focused on work and everything else that I allowed other coping mechanisms in and derailed me from family. And I
Mhm.
just wanted to focus on business and getting to a final place in my career.
Yeah.
When really there's no final place, there's always a continual learning of perpetual learning about your partner, your career, and
Mhm.
it's a dynamic instead of a you've made it and coast. You, you
Yeah.
always are moving one way or the other, either back or forward in all of those parameters of life, I would
Yeah.
imagine. What's the difference between a nurse practitioner, a medical doctor, a physician's assistant? In the medical world, they have a very similar coverage of medical duty,
Yeah.
essentially. What would be the right jargon for that?
Yeah. So good. So good. You know, I think even with what you're saying, it's dynamic. It's in process. So traditionally, right, the MD, the medical doctor, really is the gold standard for medical practice. They really get to spend the time in medical school just diving into systems and to medicine, um, not necessarily people, but medicine. So they really know that really really well. And so in our health system, that puts them really at the apex. They would be the top predator, right? If you're talking
Hmm.
about predators. And then really in our system right now, they do put PAs and NPs, even though we have the ability to do the same things, they put us just a little bit below, which is interesting. PAs really have an incredible medical background. They they get exposed to a lot of different things, just like the MDs do. So they're really in that um, medical philosophy or training. And then nursing really is a separate thing, right? Because you see it with nurses. Nurses, if from the nursing perspective, we rely on the providers that are able to write orders. We are able to assess, but we don't diagnose at that level. So then you get into nurse practitioner, and all of a sudden you bring all of your nursing experience, which is really just working with people with a good general medical background and knowledge, to the spot where now all of a sudden you get training to diagnose and evaluate and do many of the things that the doctors do. So then it comes, the next piece comes in is in the United States specifically, each state has a different recognition for what authority they're going to give the NP. So here in Oregon, it's a full. We have full scope of practice. So we're able. I'm able to. The state says, "Hey, this is everything you've been trained to do. You can do all of that
And that differs
by
on
state."
state. Okay.
Yep. So, like for example, if I move to Florida, they are they're partial. So here in Oregon, I don't need medical doctor oversight. I don't have to
As an
have a
NP.
physician. Yeah, as an NP, I
Hmm.
don't have to have the medical doctor read a certain number of my charts and sign off of them,
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, this is sound medicine. They're doing well." But
That'd
in
be called the medical director, right? In that.
yes, yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah.
And so there's ways to get around that, but you would still need to have that oversight in some of these other states. So if
Hmm.
I moved to Florida, then I would need to a medical doctor would need to be either in my practice or hired to play that role.
Hmm.
a medical director type
Medical.
role. Yeah.
That's one thing. Everything below the and it varies by state, right? But my understanding is everyone below a doctor, either the nurse, EMTs, paramedics, they all fall under a medical director. They all have to report to the medical director, right? In
Yes.
that way.
So there's protocols and things in place that really are it's amazing. It's amazing picture of really how authority works,
Hmm.
right? You assign authority to the medical doctor who's given the full scope of things, and then they write orders that then cover. And so then nurses and paramedics, yeah, all those other underneath there, they then have the opportunity to use those orders then to treat people without the doctor necessarily being present.
Hmm.
They can make decisions based on those orders.
Your protocol.
Yeah,
Yeah,
your protocols. Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Whereas now as a nurse practitioner, I get to make my own protocols and put out my own orders and help people then see where we're headed and follow those.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. What were the deciding factors now that you could be more particular? You said now I could be with wisdom, be a little bit more choosy, or
Yeah.
know where you're going. What were those deciding factors? And because you went to Michigan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Michigan. What was the school that you went
Spring
to?
Arbor. Yeah.
Spring Arbor. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, in choosing that school,
Yeah.
how did you go about that?
That's such a good question. So, because of my the different schooling that I already, no, of course, with the exception of my seminary degree, which was was really more of a conservative Christian school, so perspective. Um, I wanted to get into a program that had nursing and but also brought valued my Christian beliefs as well, because I knew that I was going to be entering into practice. Um, and you bring who you are to what you do,
Hmm.
and to an extent what you believe governs, maybe even limits what you're willing or not willing to do. So I really wanted to make sure that I got trained up in a way where my beliefs, I could see kind of how my beliefs would play out in certain circumstances and begin to forge and make my way while I was in school, rather than having to face that on my own in
Hmm.
practice. So,
Hmm.
so those were some of the things that I looked at. I was like, do they believe similar, at least in the key things? And they did. And then
What were those key things?
faith in Christ, that He is Lord and Savior, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then going from that, like the belief of in life, right? That that life is at conception, right? So you can work within the whole abortion issues. Um, uh, the school called it what it was, and that's the way I see it, right? So, and that helped me with some of those issues. Then looking at like euthanasia, looking at some of these other things that we're called on as medical providers to really deal with and say, hey, are we going to participate in that or not?
Yeah.
Are and and it's better to make that decision early on, because all of a sudden you could be faced with a job you really really like, but they require you to do certain things that you just know you can't. So
Hmm.
the sooner you decide that, the sooner you can make those decisions.
Got it. They were in alignment with that,
Yep.
and then being online, was that a factor that
Yes.
made
Yeah.
it easier to actually do and things of that nature?
Yeah, well, it was really important for me because I still needed to provide income for my family, and I didn't want to take out another huge loan that I'd done before. I only wanted to take out the minimum that I needed. So having a school that would allow me to work full time and keep my current job was hugely important. So online was the way to do that. Interesting thing that I didn't really know, which I think is important for listeners to know too, is when you make that decision, sometimes then finding the what do they call it? You get the educational piece, the didactic piece, which is so important, but then you actually have to do the training piece. Um, Residency, where you're following around actual providers. That's part of being able then to be certified to become a nurse practitioner, right? It's that the practical piece of the job, which online it's hard for a school, especially in Michigan, to find me preceptors and mentors in my state.
Hmm.
So I think that's a consideration. I considered it, but I also took a faith step, saying, "Okay, God, they're in this state. You've got mentors for me." And I'll tell you, finding each mentor was took a lot of faith on my part, because I didn't get them through all the traditional ways. I mean, it was amazing to see what experiences God brought my way, um, and allowed me to get through the program.
Yeah.
But it was really beneficial, and I thank those people that took me on, and let me learn from them. So it was
Did you
really
have
good.
to reach out for them, or
Yep,
was that okay, you had to do
I
it
had to find
personally?
them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and really it was, I mean, God directing, because there's times where you kind of go the traditional routes. You hit like the normal spots where you'd hit the different schools and the different hospitals. Hey, do you have any? And most of them are already connected with different programs. So you quickly find that most of them are already connected. They already have students coming in. They don't have room for any new students, especially somebody from out of state.
Yeah.
Which even though I was in state, my school was out of state. So then it became, well, now I've got to find private practice people. So what is my network? And my network was small, but I mean, one of the most amazing ones was, um, in my current job. At the hospital as a nurse, I did a job as an employee health, and part of that was doing an ergo assessment. And I remember the vice president, medical VP came in, new, and she needed an ergo eval, so I came in and did that for her.
What's an ergo?
So an ergonomic evaluation, what she needed was a sit-stand desk,
Mhm.
and in our organization, in order to get that, we had to do I had to come do the evaluation.
Okay.
So I came in and did that, and got her, and quickly got her set up so that she could start. Little did I know that just one little thing would end up paying out in finding me one of my spots. She didn't stay with the company very long. She ended up going to another one, and I didn't know where she went. But as I began to reach out, for my pediatrics rotation, I found this school-based clinic that was at Tualatin High School, um, and reached out to the company. And all of a sudden, this lady that I helped out do that ergonomic, that's where she went, and she was high up in the company. She saw my name and said, "We're going to do it for you."
That's
And
awesome.
I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, because that's what you need sometimes. You
Yeah.
just don't know where it's gonna come from. I had no idea she was there, and I had no idea what I'd done years ago, but she remembered my name and said yes. I mean, and that's what I needed,
Yeah.
because everybody else was a no. "We're full, we don't have room, we can't do it."
Discouraging.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. So I just kept knocking on doors,
How
and
long was that season?
for knocking.
For knocking, yeah.
Oh man. Well, so each rotation has to be done in conjunction with when the coursework for that is. So I usually was spending 6 months prior to it trying to get things set up.
Mhm.
So yeah, about
Like,
6 months before that, and honestly, that came in the last, right. God's just in
down to the
time.
wire.
Yeah, just in time, which was good, because I think there's a part of us that has to tap into hunger. Like, how hungry are we really for what it is that God's put in us to do? And
Mhm.
how hungry are for the mission? And how hungry are we for him, to see him work in our lives? And so as I became more and more desperate, I became more and more hungry. God, there were things that I was saying, you were putting in my mind, that I need to maybe reach out to, that I was like, that just sounds kind of crazy. I don't want to do that. Well, the hungrier I got, the
You had
more I
no
was willing to
option.
do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I was like, "So how can we make this work?" Yes, okay, yes, God, that you sent me to do it, I'm gonna go do that. I don't know if I'm gonna get a response or not.
Yeah,
And then, boom, yeah,
there it is.
there it is. Yeah,
That's exciting.
yeah.
You also have a certification in infection control, correct?
Oh, yes,
Where
yes.
did that come from and why?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. We value these letters after our names, and
Mhm.
and 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 to give due respect, they're earned, and they're hard to get. But God's, like, when I was in emergency room nursing, God had me get one, and I had to get it because I was a manager. And interesting enough, that's part of how this whole journey started. I got my certification, and then 2 months later, they needed to downsize in the department. Well, I didn't think it would be me at all, because I was a great employee and I loved what I was doing, and I could see others that might need to move on.
Yeah.
Well, the call came to me, and it was very surprising. "You know what? We've decided we're choosing you to downsize." And so I had to choose my response to that.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm so thankful for that, because little did I know I needed to get out of that environment. I loved the ER. ER, so much good stuff there. So much that I loved. Um, but eventually I began to see that everything was a crisis in life, because my whole 40, 50 hours of my life was around intense crisis. So that became the way I looked at the world around me, and I began to lose my love for people,
Mm.
and I wasn't really realizing it. But as I look back on it now, I was like, oof, I began to, you began to cope by treating everybody, not treating everybody, but by seeing everybody by the way you've experienced stuff in general, right?
The old adage, like, a cop always thinks someone's lying to him, no matter
Yes.
who they are.
Yes. And so in my case, I just thought everything, I was pumped for everything to be an emergency, which in that setting it is, but the rest of my life wasn't. And you can begin to get so comfortable with emergency that I was making the rest of my life an emergency and it didn't need to be.
Mm.
My family was not appreciating me making them an emergency.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Everything's a little bit more turbulent than it needed to be.
Yes, I
Yeah.
needed to find, and so God took me out of that. And that's part of what got me to this spot where I didn't know where I was going to go. I ended up having to do a night shift house supervisor for a year, and that was a great experience. I was the one in charge of the whole hospital for at nighttime, and if a crisis came up, then I had to call the CEO, call the exec, and that was really good. But in that process, I'd already done 8 years of night shift. Night shift really is rough. I am a
Yeah.
daytime person. I
Yeah.
get me up like 4 o'clock. I'm ready to rock and roll. Make me stay up all night long. That's a different story. So God thankfully moved me into employee health, and then from there, the person that was in charge of infection control ended up leaving, and I was the backup. I had no idea that I even wanted to do that. But then all of a sudden, I just through God working in my heart, He was like, "Okay, let's blend these two jobs together." So I helped the hospital kind of create this job that had me run employee health and do infection control, and then eventually got to the point where COVID hit, and God had me in COVID there because all the other hospitals were finding ways to get rid of employees that refused to do the COVID shot.
Mhm.
And at our hospital, I I knew we could do it differently. And God lended me the ears of the right people, and we came up with a way to, instead of having people lose their job, we tested on a regular basis and we were able to keep jobs. In fact, we had some of the people that lost their jobs come to our hospital.
Wow.
So we weren't short staffed during that time, as much short staffed as other hospitals.
Mhm.
And I feel like in that time, God put me there to save jobs. But that's what led me to infection control. That job, then I needed to get certified, and taught me a whole nother side of an important part of what hospitals do, and really important part of practice in general. Is how do we
Yeah.
prevent infection? The basics of that, and how do we teach and govern, and how do we follow the regulations? And yeah, yeah,
With infection control, what are the little details in that to keeping the hospital clean? And I
yeah.
know if you drop, I've been in emergency rooms more times recently than I'd like to admit, but just kids in life. But you drop something on the floor, you kind of just want to burn it after, and
Yeah.
just say, "Oh, throw that one away and get a new one." How sanitary are the hospitals? What does the infection control look like within a hospital?
So good. So good. The hospitals in general do a really good job, and
Mhm.
and partly because we have the regulatory pieces in place, right? In fact, we have to run programs that monitor how we're doing in certain areas, and based on the results of that depends. Um, some of the Medicare, Medicaid, some of the government reimbursement is dependent on how well we do on that. So there's monetary incentive
Mhm.
to do what we're supposed to do. And and supposed to do is kind of a relative term because it's like who says we're supposed to do that? Well, if we want that money, that's what we need to do. So
Yeah.
so that helps that. So there's this leverage piece in there that's from regulatory reviews of what we're doing. That's one layer. Then the other layers really are just some of the programs that we run, right? Washing our hands. Um, Really, patients and staff should see providers and people going in to take care of people washing their hands at least before they go in and washing their hands at least when they go out. And,
Yeah.
that's a minimal standard. Does that happen all the time? No, well, we're not perfect. But
Yeah.
the other part that's nice with that is, right, this is kind of more like looking at the letter of the law versus the intention of the law, right? The letter of the law says wash in and out. Well, there's things that happen that prevent us from doing that. And thankfully, we're not so fragile for the most part that we can't handle a mistake, right? And a mistake is relative. Um, Skin is such an important piece of our body. It's 80% of our immune system, right? It's if it's intact, we're generally pretty good, right? We learn from COVID, then it becomes mucous membranes. It becomes are there droplets that then get into our mucous membranes, which then
Hmm.
becomes another portal into our body, which is why there's a lot of argument over face shields and face masks and all of that, right? And there's relativity within that, and you'll hear all kinds of arguments about why this or why that. But the end of it all is you have your immune system too,
Yeah.
which will fight these things too. So it comes down to what's going on in your body, how well you're taking care of yourself, and then just having general awareness. If you're not feeling good, don't go around others, right? Try to limit that as much as possible. And if you're around and you see somebody that's sick, well, then make that decision. How close do you want to get? And really, um, what what are means that things disease could be transmitted, right?
Yeah.
And really, what's the relative risk? I think oftentimes we overplay the relative risk. Our bodies are amazing; they can
Yeah.
handle a lot.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I went down to Mexico to get some dental work done, and
Yeah.
the dentist dropped something on the floor, and he had gloves on, but picked it up and then didn't change his glove. It wasn't a tool that was going in my mouth, thankfully, but he still didn't change gloves or do anything. And he's out in the lobby with those same gloves, texting this, that, and the other. And so I just prayed and said, just sanitize everything, please, Lord, and
Yes.
guide me in this and
Oh,
protect me in this. It just speaks to the difference of sanitation amongst every country and things of that
yes.
nature. But that's
Well, you remind me of a funny story because I have to monitor all these departments. One year in our hospital, and I love to share this every time I did with the new employees coming in because it was like this is talking about infection control and why it's so important. But what you just said was so true, and COVID really made it hard because all of a sudden you're wearing all this personal protection equipment that it became well when am I supposed you kind of get mixed up about when you're supposed to take it off, and so in general, you're supposed to develop a practice that is like you do what you always do, but we know it always slips. So the same thing happened here with COVID. People began wearing their PPE too long, and the department that was the worst this one year was the ICU.
yeah,
Which you're like, how does that happen? Well, exactly what you said. They didn't realize that they were not changing their gloves in between because they just got so busy that their gloves were still on when they left the room,
yeah,
and so they weren't washing their hands, and then what was on their gloves from that room was going around to other rooms, and and so once we observed it and we let them know, they're like, "What? There's no way." But once they heard it, they realized, "Oh, our practice has slipped. Let's change it. Let's go back to what we need to do."
yeah.
It's just slowing down to do the right thing, but sometimes we need that feedback to realize that we aren't even doing the right thing because we think we are.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll hear some stories of your first year, difficulties with staff, a lawsuit, and tough cases that have really marked you.
Sounds great. I
All
can't
right.
wait.
We're back from the break where we got to hear how to hide from an ostrich and what a rhino will do to your Jeep and bashing cobras.
Yeah.
Making your own fireworks and the adventures of Joel. I love that.
Me too. It's the stuff that doesn't always get to come out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's so true. So we were gonna get into some stories from your first year.
So good. And this is, I think, so instrumental, probably for most nurses that get, when you're and when you're starting a career in general, but specifically something like this where you step from the education platform, everything you've learned, and then the training that you've done. Now all of a sudden you're doing it, but the reality hits. It's like I'm working with real people. Like what I do matters, and matters kind of in a scary way, in a sense. Like all of a sudden your first patient with HIV and you have to do an IV. And so then you're like, wow, I remember all the education on this. I've got to put like an IV in. I can't get blood on me. Am I wearing the right PPE? Right. I don't want to get what they have, yet how do I do this well? And so you step into this realm, which is just phenomenal for learning. But a couple things from that first year really, I think, really mark me as a person, but also mark the deeper passions of dealing with people. Like, I think it was 2 months into my ER career. I remember, and I worked night shift. I remember a situation that is like you never want to go through, but it was my first SIDS patient, right? So sudden infant death syndrome.
Hmm.
I remember young couple coming in frantic with their little one that was not moving. And it's like, we do everything that we can, right? You quickly get the infant and you go through all the protocols, which we have for dealing with an emergent situation where somebody's not breathing. You start breathing for them, you start doing CPR, and then you work through the protocols of putting the right medications in that really help try to jumpstart the heart and start getting what is lifeless back to life. And the longer it goes on, the more you begin to realize this one's not coming back. And so that was really, really hard. But I'll tell you, the harder dynamic with that one was really begin to watch the couple as they began to realize the horribleness of the situation. And I still remember it. It was one of those things where I think mom was working, so it was just dad. He ended up taking a nap or whatever, and then put the little one in the bed next to him. And it's not that dad rolled over on it. It's that the infant had rolled over and ended up face down and suffocated itself.
Hmm.
And so then you begin to, as the story unravels, you begin to hear dad just in anguish about, if I hadn't done this, or it could have done this differently, and blaming himself. And then mom frantic because their little one's gone and not knowing what to do, but blaming him too. And then you begin to see the bigger dynamic. You know that if they can't deal with this, not only did they lose a little one, but their marriage is over, because all of a sudden that one will never forgive the other,
Yeah.
and the other can't forgive themselves, right? So you hit this dynamic where it's like, wow, all of a sudden I'm in the middle of nursing, but it's so much more than that. It's the human dynamic of life and death. It's what do we do and how do we deal with the tough stuff in life? And all of a sudden I was like, wow, I've grown up. I have grown up. And then how do I now bring my faith into this?
Hmm.
Where is it that I can impact? Where can I put an encouraging word? Where can I silently pray or pray out loud? And so then in that spot, I began to realize anytime I'm invited into that space, or anytime there's nobody else in the room but me and that patient, like if I have an opportunity to go in with a patient that's actively dying, man, you better believe I'm not only praying for them, but I'm whispering in their ear, pleading with them to accept Christ, because this is your last chance. Take it now, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember learning those things in that first year. Another instance was just seeing how life can be so fragile. A young woman in her 20s, there's a higher risk for a pulmonary embolism in women that are on contraceptives, but also smoke.
Hmm.
And so I had a younger lady in her 20s, mid 20s, come in that couldn't breathe, and she was frantic to breathe, right? And overweight, and had the un- unfortunate opportunity, but opportunity to be with her in those final moments. Because the reality is she had an embolism that went from her heart all the way through her lungs, and we couldn't get it out. We couldn't get her to breathe, and she ended up passing away. And I think all of a sudden, just seeing, you expect to see older people die. It's like you've lived your life, and that's the natural process. But when you see an infant die, when you see somebody in their 20s that's
Young
full
has
of
a lot of
life
life.
just gone, you begin to realize there's something so much bigger at play. And I think in the last week we mentioned a lawsuit, and it's interesting. you don't get into helping people to be sued.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not what I'm looking for. But the reality is life happens. And so in my first year, unwantedly, um, I remember having, I think a lady in her 40s, she came in with abdominal pain, and abdominal pain is so obscure because, anywhere, if you have pain in there, it's such a big open space that it refers, and it's hard to tell what's going on. And she was large enough where it was just even the initial medical exam, which I didn't do right. I was the nurse just following the orders. The whole goal was to get her off to CAT scan so we could get a good image to see what was going on inside that abdominal cavity. I remember kind of getting medication for her, putting an IV in, and then it was my lunch break. So somebody sent me off to lunch. Well, just as I was leaving, she collapses as she's trying to go to the restroom. And I didn't get a chance to stick around, but ended up working a code with her, and she ended up not waking up from that. And then in hindsight, she had come in with a perforated bowel, so and then all of a sudden just had sepsis all throughout her intra-abdominal cavity, and ended up passing away. And and then as a result of that, that wrongful lawsuit, that I had the chance to walk through with, it wasn't I was just named on it. I wasn't the
Hmm.
primary, unfortunately, right? The provider gets named, and then of course the hospital, and we walked through that, ended up settling in the end. But that taught me too. It's like, no matter how much good you want to do, there's also bad. And so, you got to be able to know what you're doing and be able to communicate that, and to be able to chart that, right? That's what they teach us, to cover yourself. And but I think even more so than that, then it becomes, how can you prove what you say you did? And so begin to realize that what you write matters, what you put down, and how you communicate that matters. And then got to learn too about lawyers. It was amazing when we went to the deposition. It was like, no matter how good your intentions are, you have to understand. And I quickly learned this in the deposition. It was like, they would ask me a question, I'd respond, and they were teaching me how to respond. And they were telling me, you can't say that. Only say what you put down on the chart or what you know to be true. Because if you say anything more than that, they will take the opposite side and twist it on you. And all of a sudden, I
Oh,
began to hear my words repeated back to me in a way that I was like, that's not what I said. But if that's what you got out of it, we're in trouble.
yeah,
Right. And
yeah.
I began to realize, wow, words really matter, really matter. But more importantly, lives matter, and there's a bigger thing at play. And so I think, man, that first year taught me so much. And many times you have to go through something for the first time, and then I found in the ER quickly, like, once you've experienced something for the first time, the next time you experience it differently. It's to a different degree. May not necessarily be as definitive in and how it impacts your life, but it still impacts your life because it all adds up over time. And
Hmm.
so you have to begin to have outlets of how to process that and deal with the difficult things in life. And I think that was a microcosm to really what I think God has put in me. I love people, and I want to provide a safe space and opportunity to work with them where they're at, but to also help them bring some of these things out, because we all at our core want to be, and this is what our church teaches too: saved, healed, and delivered. And I think there's an aspect in there where we all want to be healed. We want to be as whole as possible because we want to function to our fullest extent. But then there's things we have to be delivered from. And oftentimes I think we deny that. But
Hmm.
we need to realize that, because once we know, then we can make that choice and that step to get free from it, to get away from it,
Yeah,
so that it doesn't hold the power it used to hold over us, and we can
yeah.
see it in a new light.
Seeing what you need to be delivered from as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, we all
like
have that. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
and saying yes to the change,
Yeah.
is that that change is possible. I think a lot of the times we can go through life saying this is just the way that it is, and operating in our own understanding. There's a way that seems right to a man, but surely leads to death. Knowing that through the power of Jesus, that change is possible,
Yeah.
of a complete renewing of your mind in that way. It's so incredible about this past weekend that we went through, and the His Voice movement of just breaking through and seeing just the freedom and what God speaks identity and purpose into us, and
Mm.
operating out of that. Getting comfortable with working with mentally ill and homeless.
So good.
Talking about the HIV, patients. As a care provider, you can almost put up a guard where you objectify them in a way, I would imagine,
Yeah.
and say, and not treat them as a human, and then they feel less than, and you
Mm.
being a light to actually, yes, you have this, but this isn't who you are.
Yeah.
Reaffirming in that. I would imagine that's part of being comfortable with the homeless and mentally ill as well.
And I think you really tap on something there. And I probably haven't really put it together quite like that, but I really agree with you. I feel like um, it was instrumental for me to see, growing up in a third world country. It was like, what is a home, right? Over there, it's like
Yeah.
homelessness. It's a shelter that you stay in. So I mean, everybody's homeless to an extent there, and so you come here and you have just a homeless population, which I got to deal a lot with in the ER because that became the rescue zone. ERs became like if you just couldn't get anything to eat or you were way too cold, then that's where you go, right? And there's a process in our system where you can get warmth for a while, you can get a sandwich, and they know that as their resource, and it's a resource that they're choosing to use because the reality is um,
Mhm.
there's a part of it that what we do serves us, and so for that population, there's a whole nother culture that you get used to once you start in that way of life, and that serves you because you want to be away from society. Society's really hurt you. You've got your own society in a way, but you still need resources, and you're still a human. Just because you don't choose to interact in the mainstream culture, just because you have a different culture, I mean, it's really what it becomes. Um, doesn't mean you're not human. And so you're absolutely right. I think caregivers. Um, to protect ourselves and our feelings and to protect what we see as dangerous in us, it's easy to put up a wall. But when the opposite should happen, and this is thankfully I was in a spot where I was whole enough to be able to engage this way. I remember having, ladies that had made a lifestyle off of poles and routines like that, where they were um, serving the needs of men that way.
Mhm.
And I always invited the opportunity to have a conversation with them because I wanted to know why it was that they did what they did, and I wanted to know what kept them there, and if they wanted something different. And then the same with homeless. I remember so many times just, do you have other options? What is it you want? And having these conversations with them helped me understand where they were coming from, and gave me a clue as to what they were escaping from too, right?
Yeah.
Because again,
Yeah.
the choices we make feed a certain part of us. And I began to understand, the lady that was on the pole. I remember one of the most profound things she told me was, I love what I do because it's the one area in my life where I can control those around me,
Mhm.
where I can control the men. I do what I do, and they do what I want them to do. And I was like, "What?"
Without them knowing, or
Without
yeah.
them knowing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, "That is mind-blowing, but also incredibly sad."
Mhm.
That and so, I tried to find ways to interact that way. Homeless, the same thing, was like, are there other options? Do you want out? And there's always a reason. There's a mental health issue, or there's a societal big thing where they just felt rejected, and so this works for them.
Yeah.
And and so quickly became from me trying to make them comfortable in with the way that I thought they should be, to like, how can I help you with where you're at
Mm.
and recognize who you are? Even the mentally health. I remember some you come in with like schizophrenia and some crazy mental health crises, and I remember one time just having to go in and spend a lot of time with this guy because he was just beating on things and really not in his right mind. And eventually we began talking, and he was like, "Hey, you see that light up there? That's a portal. It's going to beam me up into space." And I remember thinking, I can argue with him on that and tell him what it really is. I can just join him. So I was like, "Okay, man, sounds good. Where are we going to go?" And I began to interact with him where he was at.
Yeah.
And just by doing that, it's not always like the most therapeutic, but sometimes you have to join them where they're at in order to gain enough of their trust.
Mhm.
Hey, you're not seeing me as different, and you're trying to see it the way I'm seeing it, and opened up opportunities to begin to interact where he was at, right? And I
Yeah.
think that was key. There's other times where I remember guys coming in, and they're going to go to an alcohol treatment program the next day, and they're just trying to make it through the night. And I remember being in there. Sometimes you want it more for people than they want it for themselves, and so we work really hard to keep them in there. And then sometimes, like, I remember this one guy, he stayed most of the night, and he was just about ready to get transported, and it was like the last 30 minutes, and that's when it got most desperate. And he's like, "Man, I'm out of here." And I was like, I pleaded with him, but he wanted to go. And so,
Yeah.
you got to let him, go. And in the end, I think that's it. We all want our choice. We all want options, and we just want to be supported as we walk through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But
N-
it's really the human experience. So the
Yeah.
ER taught me just this wide range of hurts, and how we cope, and what we do, and the choices we make, and where it plays out or can play out, and then just how to interact with people in those ways, seeing the humanness in all of us.
We all want to be heard, loved, cared for,
Yeah.
and if you don't come from where they're at, you can't find the little lie that has skewed
Yeah.
their perception of the way that we are to truly operate. I find that the better the lie, it's just 1 degree off. It's
Yeah.
just a subtle,
Yes.
slight subtlety. Everything else is correct, but it's just this one skew that guides them off course, and
Yes.
and it's something that you can't truly see until you know who they are, see who they are for where they've been and where they're
Mhm.
going. In being so strong and in caring for others and making those decisions to meet people with where they're at while incorporating your faith, I imagine there's parts where other providers will go, man, Joel's on it again. He's, you need to leave that at home and not bring that into the workplace. Have you ran into that? Medical providers can be, it's XYZ, and there's no room for faith, and there's no room for supernatural healing and things of that nature.
It's difficult to see what you don't believe, right? And
Yeah.
I think so often, decisions and choices and beliefs we make, when all of a sudden we're faced with something that doesn't fit into that paradigm, that is the protection mechanism, is to say, well, A plus B equals C, so that can't be. And but it's experience that makes the difference. So I'm with you. I did um I was often criticized for taking too much time with my patients. Surprise. I
Yeah.
care a lot about them.
Yeah.
And so I learned how to speed that up. But I also learned that if you're all of a sudden dealing with a patient that nobody else wants to deal with, they don't care. Go spend as much time as you want in there, because they don't have to deal with it. And so there's kind of this fine balance in that too, right? Um, and I think it's important to live your faith out as to live it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime I had a chance to talk, I would. Anytime a patient invited me to pray, I would. Um, but I did realize that there was times where I couldn't. I would pray quietly if I wasn't invited. Otherwise, I would pray with them when
Mm-hmm.
invited. And then there's just God moments, like sometimes where you arrive in a room and it's like, this person is suicidal and been cutting themselves, even though you can't see any evidence. And so you speak to that directly, and they're profoundly impacted because God told you that. And then you have this crazy conversation. And so you love those moments too, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, um, I think at the end of the day, with providers and caregivers in general, if they're seeing good happen for their patient or for the patients, mm, there's a certain amount of tolerance. And so we have to be able to be willing to wade in that,
Yeah.
even though there is criticism for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
I love that. Kind of like accepting the placebo effect, even though it's the placebo effect. Like, you're still,
Yes.
it's working.
Right.
I'll take it.
Can't explain it, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that go in? Now you have your own clinic that you're running. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yep. I've got it on telehealth, almost in physical location.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah.
And how is that going, and how are you managing things? How does that differ from your times in the hospital, and
Yeah.
what changes are you making?
Wow. That's so good. You know, um, so good. When you work for somebody else, you're kind of bound to some of their rules, or working within their parameters that they set. So when you work for yourself, then you set those rules. So And then you also realize the consequences for those decisions. Consequences is interesting, not really a good word. If I choose to spend more time with the patient, then that's what I choose to do,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily getting any more money or being paid anymore. I It's just my investment in that person. I choose to do that, and so I think as my own having my own clinic, I have that chance and choice to do that. I also have the chance and ability to pray with people, meet them where they're at, to have the conversations without, like you're saying, without scrutiny from other people,
Hmm.
which I think is huge because I really believe in the full meal deal. As a health provider, I'm here taking care of the body, but the reality is the body's not eternal. This body's going to go. We're going to get an eternal body when we die. That's my belief system with our faith. The other part of it is we have our soul and our spirit, right? Which don't die with our body, but they go with our eternal body when we get that. And so there's an eternal part in all of us. And I think so I get the opportunity to work with the physical body, but I also like to try to connect us to our spirit and our soul, and helping people realize, this is where the faith aspect comes in, and realize, my belief system is from God we came, into God we go back to. So this journey on earth really is our return to him.
Hmm.
And part of this whole journey is me just using up every ounce of what I've got in my physical body to get back to him.
Yeah.
And so when I look at it from that perspective, then I really try to have my conversations that way with people too. You know, is it any doubt that when you're 99 years old and your body's failing, that your body's failing? No. The question then becomes, well, where are you headed next,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and how do we help you know that that's where you're going? Um, More so than how can we help your physical body heal? But your physical body may get healed at this moment, but the reality is we're all headed a certain direction. We're all headed to physical death,
Yeah.
so that we can go back to where we came from anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of, I like to integrate that with all that I do,
I love that.
because
Yeah.
it puts a positive spin on what's happening rather than, if we just think from the physical mindset, death is death. Who wants that? Who wants that? And God never originally created that, right? That
Hmm.
came in because sin came into the world. Um, uh, but it's necessary now. It's a
Yeah.
necessary part for us to return to
Yeah.
where we're supposed to go, where we came from originally anyway.
Yeah.
And the process we get is to choose that or not, and where do we want to spend eternity, right?
Yeah. You have to have an eternal perspective daily, because
Yes.
that's where you're going. Um, there's a question posed by one of our guests, and it was an understanding of why bad things happen if God is good. So why do bad
Mm,
things happen? Do you have any? It's one thing that
mm,
after that, I didn't have a good answer during the conversation,
yeah.
but I had since gone back and researched it, and I have a take on it. Why do bad things happen to good people if God is good?
It's an interesting question because it really is, like you're saying, a challenging one. And I don't know if I have a great answer, but what I know is what I've learned, and
Hmm.
really part of what I've searched as well, because I asked that question too. Um, Number one, we live in a fallen world. There
Yeah.
is sin in this world. Do I do bad things? Yes. Do I call them bad things? Yes.
Yeah.
Do I want to do bad things? No, but I do.
Yeah.
So bad things happen because I live in a fallen world. So then we get into the aspect of what people are asking. Well, why does God allow that?
Hmm.
It really comes down to how He created us. When we chose, because He gave us the right in the garden, in our perfected Adam and Eve, to choose to
Yeah.
obey Him or not.
Yeah.
When we chose to not obey Him, when Adam and Eve and we essentially chose not to obey Him, we have this will that He put in us. And as parents, I think we begin to understand this will a little bit more. We begin to understand the heart of the Father. God could make us love Him. God could make us perfect and never give us choice.
Hmm.
But what kind of option is that?
Yeah.
And we can answer that by just looking at our kids. We want our kids to willingly choose us. We want our kids to willingly, lovingly come to us. If we compelled them and made them do it, it would feel so different.
Yeah.
And God's the same way. He
Yeah.
gave us the ultimate gift to choose him, because that is love. That itself, to choose the one who made us, is love.
Yeah.
And he is love. And so I think in that, we get caught up in this whole thing of like, why do bad things happen? Well, we chose sin. And so from that, bad things came into the world. God never wanted that, but he allowed it because of his infinite love for us. And in that process, then, his love extended to Jesus Christ, who he sent his own son to die for us. And when you see what he did, he chose to do, he willingly, he made that choice for us so that we could come back to him,
Yeah.
so that we could live a life separate from sin because Jesus paid the price for that. We begin to understand that it's not about good and bad anymore. It's about choosing him.
Yeah.
And so all things in my life, good or bad, point to him. And in the end, what is bad becomes good because God makes it that way.
Yeah.
And so then the argument for why does God allow bad things to happen in our life could also be switched around. Why does he allow good things to happen in our life, right? The opposite is true too. And again, it comes down to his love.
Yeah.
He loves us so much that he wants us to choose. And in those choices, we choose good and we choose bad.
Mm-hmm.
And bad things happen. I do bad things. I choose to do bad things, right?
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden the argument breaks down to what is God allow? It comes back to again how he created us. He wants us to willingly choose him.
Yeah.
And if we allow ourselves to see it, we'll begin to see even the bad things shape us. So when I've gone off the rails, I've learned the outer boundaries of things, but also in that process, I've allowed God to show me his incredible love for me because he restores things and he heals things.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, God, how could you do that in spite of what I did? And he's like, well, I love you regardless of what you do, right? I love you, period.
Yeah.
And I think that's the profound concept underneath all of that. It helps flip it on its head. It's not necessarily that there's this one word answer. It is. It's God's love.
Yeah.
But you have to explain it because people don't know God's love.
Yeah.
And until you experience his love, you really don't know the answer to the question.
Yeah. Yeah. God's love and free will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. What did you come up with? I'm always.
That's what I came up with, was that we live in a fallen world and God gave up sense of his power to allow for free will.
Yeah.
And in that gives true love. Exactly what you said. Because what is love if you're forced into it?
Yeah.
That isn't love. And being patient is part of loving. and God is so patient with us wherever we're at. And every time I think back in my life where grace is abound, it's just and seeing God's love for me and others, it's I'm all the more thankful. You could say that the bad things are all working for the goodness of God.
Yeah.
Nursing has been predominantly a female role. Was there any opposition in your mind of, I'm not going to become a nurse because I'm a man? Was there any stigma towards that career when you're looking at that?
Wow. You know what? Maybe subconsciously. To be honest with that, I don't remember having that clear of a thought that direction, but that maybe have played into partly why.
Yeah.
I think the other piece that maybe made me think about being a doctor first was just more that I knew that role was more the decision maker and the one in kind of the authority piece than the nurse, which was really kind of it's true, but not true. Like a provider and a doctor can't do what they do without having a nurse. So it becomes this beautiful symbiotic relationship where we really need each other.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that then. So I think you're right. There are some paradigm shifts and maybe thoughts that came in that maybe not look at it like I should have in the very beginning. I wish I'd seen it differently.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, life would have been so different.
Yeah.
I would have had a direction and a mission earlier on in my life.
Well, and I see it as there's a gentleness as a man that need to have to be successful with relationships around you. If you're always the authoritarian, brash individual, you're only going to push away the relationships that you want and need.
Yeah.
and having a hardness as being the stoic, strong man all the time that's always wrong and or always right and never wrong, you
Yes,
know? And
yes.
um, that's a
Oh,
quality that I see in you and that I appreciate about you is that a gentleness and
that's good. I like what you're saying because I think you've kind of opened up a lot of different topics with what you said there. We have kind of these traditional views of kind of men and women, and then and then we when we get around, I think like I grew up in kind of a conservative Christian viewpoint, so uh, but then as I got older, and we got more involved with some of the charismatic movements, I just began to see lots of different ways to see God and express God. But really, I think for me, the changing point came when once I began to understand Father God and the heart of the Father. I began to realize just um, how soft His heart is for us. That
Mhm.
I wanted that in my life. I want to approach people with His love, not with my egocentric must be my way perspective, which sometimes when you have knowledge or when you have authority, you think that's the way you have to interact with people.
Yeah.
And and I've learned that you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. That's not
Yeah.
what God interacts with me where I'm at,
Yeah.
not where I want him to be or not where I want to be. He comes and we're exactly where I'm at. So I need to learn how to do that. And I can't do that um if I'm not willing to just put everything aside and join somebody where they're at.
Yeah.
Let me see it from your perspective because I don't know what you're going through, right? I don't
Yeah.
see it your way, but I want to, right? And you can't do that unless you come in with that openness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And having a presence of peace every room that you walk
Yes.
into.
Oh, I so
Yeah.
want that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. The more that I study leadership, I see that the best leaders don't lead from the front or the top or the bottom, but
Yes.
from the middle. And they know exactly where everybody's at. And they're not trying to be the leader, but they're trying to be the advocate for everybody, the people that they are leading. And
Yes.
and you can only do that when you're alongside of them and not above or below, but right there with them. And
That's so good.
I love that.
So good. Yes.
Ultimately, say I'm going to follow Jesus. What is your testimony in
Yeah.
that? Growing up as pastor's kid, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
essentially PK, you could say that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
how does that journey look? It's totally the opposite of my journey. I was an atheist for until I could make that decision of what I really believe in to my junior year of college. So junior year of high school, junior year of college was the kind of the time period, and then I gave my life to the Lord. What does that look like with somebody that grew up with pastors as your parents, and
Yeah.
what's your testimony to coming to the Lord?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting. God knows us, right? Because He made us. So, and He pursues us. I think when we begin to look at our lives, He pursues us all throughout our lives. And I think just some of us are more. I don't. I haven't figured it out yet because everybody's story is different, right? So
Hmm.
for mine, um, I growing up in like you said, in a ministry setting with my parents that were missionaries who had done Bible school and had given their lives to serving the Lord. Um, Jesus was talked about a lot in our family, and we went to church and did all of those things. But I remember when I was 5, just God captured my heart. Probably in one of the Sunday school lessons, we learned about Jesus and the salvation message. I don't remember that I actually accepted Jesus at Sunday school because what I remember is then during the week I was at preschool, and just at lunchtime at preschool I found all of a sudden I got on my knees and gave my life to Jesus, and I remember going home and telling mom and dad that, and that was the beginning of it. So I didn't kind of make it in the usual. Usually it's like it's at church or somewhere, and they're offering the salvation message, and you pray with
Yeah.
everybody else, and you do that. I remember that I specifically did it outside of that and there. And I remember early on just knowing that God loved me and was calling me, and I didn't know what for, right? So then the rest of those early years were just doing the things that God had given me to do. But and as I think back about it, and then it was responding to Him. So early on in my childhood, some of my favorite places to be, especially when I knew that I was in internal turmoil, was to get away and be with God. I
Mhm.
learned that at an early age, and I don't know. It's not that I saw my parents necessarily do that. I always saw my parents. My mom was really good at reading the Bible. She'd do her Bible study every day. She'd kind of help family devotions. So very systematic. And then I knew Dad prayed, but and had his own personal life with Jesus. But but I made it my own in these moments where I remember climbing up to the top of tall trees and just loving to be up there. And I just remember sensing God like in
Yeah.
those places.
Yeah.
And I remember I went away to boarding school when I was in 10th, when I was 10 to 12. So I went away from home and often found myself in situations where, you have to kind of figure out life yourself when you're living away from home. And I had this space in the woods where I would always go. And even at school, I would go there when I was struggling at break time, run out there, and I would just be in God's presence in these spaces. And I remember just being profoundly impacted with his presence during those times. He would speak to me and comfort me and just love on me. And all throughout that. But I, and so so I developed some of those things, but I think um faith really takes hold once you get challenged a little bit. And so that, like you were saying, you know, I learned the practice and the disciplines, and I made it essentially my own to a point. But then it's when you leave home that you
Mhm.
really get to test that. And you're like, how much is this really going to be my own, or how much of that was because I lived in a setting where all that was provided, right? And I
Yeah.
think so often we run into that, people that grow up in Christian homes, right? That's the challenge of our kids because they live in our faith.
Mhm.
So then, how do we help them transition to their own faith when they get there? And I think for me, that happened then when I went away to college. Um, um, I had a chance to really kind of just make it my own, and had a chance to struggle a little bit with it's growing up overseas. You see nudity in a different way, but all of a sudden I came back to the United States and got influenced a little bit, and so porn and some of those things I struggled with for a little bit in my early college years, and really wrestled with. I didn't like how it made me feel, but yet at times you wanted to just went to it, and it's like, why am I doing this, and how do I get free from it? And eventually, God brought me through the process of healing from that and being free from that, and
Yeah.
looking to help others because it's such a big part of our society.
Yeah.
It The sexual dynamic is, it wasn't talked about. So there wasn't, like in our church, we talk a lot about sexual discipleship.
Yeah.
And it's so important because, it's something that God made that he made for specific circumstances and to be enjoyed. And if you never talk about it, then it becomes this taboo thing. And that's what I grew up in. It was like this
Mm.
mystery thing that all of a sudden you get to have when you get married. And if you don't and you do it beforehand, there's all these like bad things and you feel horrible and all this other societal shame and guilt, which comes with disobedience. It comes with those things. But I get to wrestle with that. And I think wrestling through that just brought me closer to God. It again told me, man, I am human. I have problems and I need God's help. And so really helped me press more and more into him. And that and then just life, right? God blesses me with a marriage where my wife is strong in her faith,
Yeah.
and we're both strong. And so early on in our marriage, I think marriage can be such a defining moment in our faith because you come into it with expectations, and then that first year is so what for me was so different um, than what I expected, and most of my life to that point went the way I expected.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get into marriage and you're like, this is the way it's going to be, it's going to be amazing. And then you have these thoughts about how sex is going to be and how your relationship's going to be. And then all of a sudden you realize, whoa, this is way different than I thought. So then it becomes like, okay, well, I made this lifelong commitment, and, and it becomes, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to honor that? How do I wrestle with these internal things where I'm like, I'm not getting all of my needs met because my wife's trying to figure out who she is and I'm trying to figure out who I am. And when I say certain things and it rubs her the wrong way and we just have this tension and I just want peace. And so I remember marriage just drove me to God. That first year was like, God, you gave me a gift and I don't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know
like,
how to handle your
this
gift.
is a terrible gift sometimes. You call this, you
Yes.
said you give good things.
Yes. And
Yeah.
and so then God pressed into me a couple things, and this really changed my whole strategy and how I do marriage and really how we do parenting. Um, Number one, I'm responsible for myself. When I die, God's going to ask me
Mm,
what I did in regards to my relationship with him.
mhm.
He's not going to ask me about necessarily um, my wife. I am not absolutely, I'm not responsible for my wife, but I am responsible for the environment I create around her. I
Mhm,
am responsible for some of the maybe good, bad things that I do, but I'm
mhm,
not ultimately responsible for her decisions. I'm responsible for mine.
mhm.
And once I realized that, I began to say, okay, God, I'm letting go of my expectations. I'm letting go of that. Help me to create an environment where my wife can bloom. Help me to create an environment where she can be more than she ever thought she could be. Help me
I
to
love
love
that.
her that way.
Yeah,
Because in that process, my heart turns towards her and I begin to see all your goodness instead of all the tension.
yeah.
Right. And the other thing that he pressed on me was from Proverbs, I think it was 15:7, where it says, don't uh, rem- remember or remember or honor the bride of your youth. And I kept thinking, my wife gave me her commitment. She became my bride at an early age. Whenever you get married, honor her for where she's at and remember her that way. And I think um, and continue to love her that way. And so for me, I was just profoundly impacted. Like I need to see I need to always be reflecting back to her how beautiful she is, and I need to always remember, like, how she looks, to the point where when I look at her, all I see is what I remember of her, right? And
Yeah.
so as she begins to bag on herself for getting older and body parts sagging and all these other things that she doesn't like, help me to see her the way I've always seen her. Help me to always point out the good things. Help me to help her love herself and see herself the way I see her,
Mhm.
because we need that help.
Yeah.
And so that became kind of the two things that I just that God used marriage to help push me not only to loving her, but to learning his love for me and drew me closer to him.
I love that. The triangle of marriage from two individuals coming to making one is it's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a mystery too.
Yes, 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 yes. Continually.
Yeah.
Continually. Just when we think we get it, we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Sorry to change gears again.
Ooh, love it.
I part of what you do in your clinic is you take care of families individually. How can you be an advocate for your own health care?
Ooh, I'm so glad you asked that
Yeah.
question. Um, I think I was thinking about that question a lot, and working with lots of different generations, we all come from different paradigms. The older generation is so used to having the authority doctor figure, where you don't have to really think a ton about your health. You just trust the person that you're seeing
Mhm.
to take care of you. So they really come from a paradigm where it's hard for them to ask questions. It's hard for them to really challenge. Hard for them to really engage. So I think that's the first thing is like advocating for your own health is really taking an active role in it, engaging in where it is. You know, um, I'm not one of those providers that says don't look on the internet. I want you to look, but I also want you to know that what you're seeing, you may not understand what you're seeing. So engage to the point to learn, and
Yeah.
let's bring that to the table. Let's talk about that. Let me lend what I know to what you're learning, and let's come to a solution that makes sense for you. You know, I think that's where we need to head. And so often in healthcare, we're pr- we want to just be the authority figure. And
Mhm.
the reality is I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of information, but I don't know how you're choosing to use it. So I can't really tell you what to do until I know what you want to do, until I know what you will and won't do. Right? I can give you a prescription for something, but I can't make you take it.
Yeah.
So what's the use in what I'm doing if it doesn't engage you where you're at? So I
Yeah.
think really it takes a paradigm shift on both parts. But for an individual to advocate, I would say, learn about what's going on with your body. Um, I do a lot of wound care as well. And so just a visual example of how to engage. Um, you may not like to look at pictures, but if it's on your body, right? If you've got a wound on your body, I oftentimes want to show the individual pictures, and because the value in seeing what's going on is the opportunity then to talk through it,
Mhm.
and then So 1 week you look at a picture and we talk through what's going on there,
Yeah.
right? And then the next week we come back and we take another picture and we look at that, and you have the opportunity to compare. And you have the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to begin to learn what's going on in your body so that we can approach the wound healing, right? And I think that's the same with anything in your health. It's like, what's going on? What is it that you want? Let's engage in productive conversation around what it is you're willing to do to help get that better, right? And what you're not willing to do. That's the other side of it too, is, are there things that you don't wanna do? Good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll just take those off the table, right?
Yeah.
Or we'll talk about those and say, well, maybe you could change your mind on that, but if you don't at this time, let's do these until you do change your mind, right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's meeting people where they're at. Um, so I put the onus also on providers because we need to come to the table willing to hear what our patients want.
Yeah. Be more flexible in that way.
Yeah.
How often is insurance what they'll provide,
Mm.
different types of insurances, deciding what patients can and can't have? And is there a better system that you see in having, traditional insurance, maybe a Medishare
Yeah.
type where it's a Christian group or a group of people network paying together, or just going to privatized, I'm going to pay everything on cash
Yeah.
individually. Do you see people's decisions being based off of those parameters at all?
That's so good. I think society and culture is changing, but we're at a spot where we're in between a lot of different, and you've mentioned them, the traditional insurance, I like the Christian Medishare option as well. And then the cash based, for the like kind of a direct primary care where you pay a subscription and you get care, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of different options in there. And is there anyone that's best? It's hard to put a blanket on that because we see some of the more socialist countries as well. They have a healthcare system that takes care of everything, but there's limitations to that, right? There's good things and there's bad things. So it's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
I think we're at a spot, and this is what I'm trying to do with my clinic. So I'm still in the working process of it all. I want to be able to take all of it because it really depends again on what the individual's aspect and where they're at. It depends on their financial situation. It depends
Yeah.
on their resources. You know, because if you may have a job that provides health insurance, that's, you're paying a little bit, you're paying from your paycheck. You don't, and you start out that way, you don't realize that that money's lost, right? Because it just automatically comes
Directly.
out to your insurance. So in that case, you're paying for your insurance, but you don't realize it because the end result is you still have your net check that it's already taken out of, and you just don't realize the money that you're paying towards it. So you have this benefit that you're paying for, but you don't realize it,
Hmm.
and they want to use it. So let's use it. I feel like, let's use it. Let's use it to the extent, but it takes knowing now, like you were saying, what are the insurance companies? What will they reimburse? What will they pay for? And what won't they? So then, it really takes a lot of effort to try to figure that out, provide that information to your patients so they know what they're paying out of their pocket. And then my goal is to have these other models too, where you can begin to compare. Hey, this is what using your insurance, this is what you'd pay. Using this other system, this is what you'd pay, right? Using this other system, this is what you'd pay. And then it has to fit into what they're able to do.
Yeah.
And I think we're at a spot right now where we need a wide variety of options,
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
because we don't have a standardized system in this country. And I don't know if we'll ever get there. Our system is broken, and we're constantly trying to make changes to it, right? We're trying to fix it. But but we're also very American, and we like our own way of doing
Yeah.
things. And so
Yeah.
how do you, I guess, again, it comes down to options, I think.
Yeah. And taking the responsibility as the patient or as the individual and knowing what you can spend and can't spend, and
Yes.
what you need health wise, and the risk options and things of that nature. I know for me personally, early on, um, I went more towards the Metashare type
Yeah.
things because the risk ratio
Yep.
of having young kids and disease and things of that nature was a little bit less.
Yep.
And also, it provided a great care if the kids did need to use it.
Yeah.
And I think as I get older, I think that may change to maybe a more traditional route of some sort, and also tax positions and things of that nature where it's all
Yes.
integrated. but what risks you're willing to take. And everyone that I talk to, it's a dynamic, complicated issue. Every elusive, moving target.
It is.
Yeah,
It is because we're in a failing body, right? So it's
yeah,
like, and there's elements where God can heal. God chooses to heal us for His glory, and He does, and so we get through illnesses. But there's also times where He chooses not to. He chooses it's time to take us home, and so then it's eh, in the end again. Where does that insurance play the part, right? And I
mhm,
think it plays the part in how we try to manage our finances.
yeah.
Just looking at that and trying to have the information to make a good decision about what you want to do with the money you've been given.
Yeah. And one part of what you do at your clinic, weight loss and health in that direction, and also part of the supplement company. What are some things that people can do to take control in our society? Find that our nutritional understanding is lacking, view food as comfort and not as nutrition to a point,
Yeah.
and not truly understand what we're putting into our bodies. Is there kind of a formula or a pathway that you look first when addressing these health issues within client?
Yeah, it's wow, it's interesting. I think like you're saying in regards to nutrition, right? Part of how you feel, part of the energy that you experience in your life, the way you live your life, right? Partners with kind of the activities that you do, partners with the food you eat as well. I, we were in Costa Rica for a week, and their food's way different.
Yeah,
Where their food was so good,
yeah,
so non-processed, so non-full of junk.
yeah.
Like you could eat a meal and not feel overly full, not feel sick. Um, so different countries just have different levels of like their food impacts you differently because the quality of food.
Hmm.
But getting back to here, I think I engage with patients based on kind of what it is with their what they want with their life, and the answer kind of comes in that, do you have the energy that you need for what you're doing? Are you doing what you want to do? Are you physically capable of doing that? And do you foresee yourself continuing to do that for as long as you want to, right? I think that's the other part of it. Quality of life, right? Are you sleeping well at night? And then we can begin to look at your nutrition, right? um, Weight has a huge impact on our bodies. We know
Hmm.
the more weight we carry, the longer we carry it, the more strain it is on our internal organs. So,
And hormone systems, and then that
yes,
affects your sleep, and it's a cyclical downward spiral in
yes.
that way.
So we need a reality check. We need
Hmm.
to see where we at today and what have we damaged already?
Yeah,
How do we
yeah,
help that? And what's not damaged yet? How can we get it to be optimal for us?
yeah.
Yeah.
Are there things that you look at predominantly? Recently hired a nutrition coach and
Ooh,
trainer this past summer, and one of the biggest things that we looked at was the hormones and sleep, and
yeah.
just overall nutrition. And once I got dialed in and having good sleep, good quality of sleep, and eating nutritiously, I kind of came to life. Honestly, it's
Crazy.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. So is there just a baseline that you think that everybody across the board should be, trying to get 8 hours of sleep, drinking, how many ever ounces of water, things, just little simple things, getting off your phone hour before you sleep or 2 hours before you sleep. Do you have any protocol towards that at all?
Yeah, I think the things that you've mentioned
Yeah,
certainly are the things that I would talk about if you're struggling with sleep. Yes, definitely.
yeah.
Shutting down the things that stimulate your mind so that your mind can start to go to sleep.
Mhm.
Learning new habits. Certainly turning off your phone or keeping it away. Now, some people put their phone in a whole different room. I so 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 those are all ideas that I counsel on. But the reality is again, it has to be something that's going to work for you.
Ah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. That actually is gonna be done.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you can tell them to drink, drink your body weight, right? And you drink in ounces, drink your body weight of water. Well, what are you drinking now? right? And how can we eventually get there really becomes the process that we talk about. How can we increase that fluids, especially during the winter when it's hard to drink water?
Yeah.
It's cold. Nobody wants to drink water. Well, or are there other ways to do it? Is there, and there's supplements out there that help push water more, help hydrate your body as well. So they have flavoring and other things that we can, there's other lots of different options to help try to get this up. And then we can measure that through different scales, different weight machines have the ability to kind of look at what your hydration is. Lots of other tests have a way to help give us a standard to measure to see where you're at, so that we can get you from maybe the red zone, which is the bad zone, right into the green zone where you're at optimal for you. And I think
Hmm.
those are different gauges and tools that I would engage in. Protein is a huge deal. You want to keep the muscle mass, then you got to provide the building blocks for that to your body.
Yeah.
And our diets don't often have protein. And we live in now in a time when the protein can be put in a lot of different things. So there's a lot of creative ways to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
On that, I see the protein craze in the grocery store, and
yes,
it's another marketing scheme. Um,
totally.
and would you say that there's to look out for these products, that the protein chips and things of that nature? Just because it
Mm,
says protein on it, it may not be the best nutritious food. And like, I'm a sucker for these cookies, that they're protein cookies, but I looked at them and they're 500 calories. I'm
yes.
like, for one cookie,
But it's got
but it's
protein.
got protein in it. So it's like, well, it's not really the best food in that regard because of the ratio. So when we talk about
Yeah.
protein, are you saying that there needs to be a better ratio to protein to carbohydrate
Yes, and
and
fats.
okay,
Yes,
and fats?
totally.
So is what would that ratio be off the top of your
Oof.
head, or kind of something that you look towards?
That's a good question. I don't remember off the top of my head. I would certainly say let's keep the anything you're drinking, trying to keep the carbs low. But
Hmm.
again, the problem with that, and with fats too, is that's the fats are the flavor, carbs tend to be the sweetener, right? So again, it comes down to what can you reasonably like
Yeah.
and drink, knowing protein. eh, So protein is naturally in our world, right? So if we're getting it from natural sources, pro- protein's not necessarily going to be in my chocolate chip cookie, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
chocolate chip cookie is essentially carbs and fats.
Yeah.
So somebody's found a way to put something in there and not mess around the flavor. So it's a workaround. I mean, but again, we have to start with where people are at too. Like
Yeah.
if you're getting no protein, then I'm happy that you get some.
Yeah.
Um, and we can begin to work to where you need to get. But I mean, ideally, it would become from natural places.
Natural.
So
Yeah.
like, there's days where I will, knowing that I need to have more protein. You know, I like protein powder. I'll put in a little water.
Hmm.
You know what you're getting. You're not getting all the extras. You
Hmm.
know the ratios there, and generally they're set up so you're getting, 20 grams of protein, minimal amount of carbs, 1 or 2 grams,
Yeah.
and of course in those you don't have to have any fats. So it's nice to then save the fats for like dinner and for lunch where you need a little butter or a little gravy or something on there to just make it a little bit better.
I go towards the 1 to 1.2 grams of protein
Yep.
of your body weight,
Yes,
right?
totally.
And then from there backfill everything from whatever calories I'm trying to hit,
Yeah.
based on whatever season of um, life I'm trying to do, rather cut or gain. But
Yes.
um,
I would agree.
yeah.
But so many people fall so short of that.
Hmm.
So it's like in working with people, you got to start where they're at and help increase that. And I totally agree that that's
Yeah.
ideal.
Do you work with GLP, different peptides and things of that nature in your
Yes.
work?
You know, I think as we look at all the different options, like we were talking about with insurances, I believe even like pharmaceuticals, it's like there's a whole bunch of different worlds. You got the manufactured pharmaceuticals, and then you've got the compounded pharmaceuticals, which I kind of play in both worlds. And so I do agree. I think peptides are an interesting science. It's looking at them and what they're able to do. I've been working with some patients, and one I've helped get better sleep through a certain peptide that we've worked with. GLP-1s helped a lot of people lose weight. So it definitely is a fad. It definitely is the cutting edge what we're doing now. But there's more reasons to use it than to be afraid of it.
Hmm.
Um, it's an incredible tool. But again, like everything, it's in how we use it and how we learn to adjust to it, right? Um, Not learning to depend on it, but learning to use it as a tool in our lives. And that's really what I work with people on. My goal with most of this stuff, unless you're totally deficient, like if you're a diabetic and you don't make any insulin at all, you need insulin. So, for life, you're going to be on insulin.
Yeah.
But like a GLP-1, most of my patients, I work to get them from where they're not ideally down to their ideal weight.
Hmm.
And then we work on this weaning off process because I don't want you to be on that for life.
Yeah.
It becomes more of a tool in your life. And then it's like, let's get you off of that and let's try to keep you where you're at. But we need a reset. If you've been obese for a long time, your body's comfortable there, even though it's doing a ton of damage.
Yeah.
We need to get your body comfortable at a good weight. And then we need to help support your body so it can stay there. And so it begins becoming like developing good habits, the things we've
Yeah.
talked about, getting the right protein, getting better sleep, how you eat, increasing your activity. If you get your weight down and you start becoming more active, don't you want to keep that?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the longest people, some of the oldest patients that I work with are the ones that stay the most mobile. The
Yeah.
moment you lose your mobility is the moment you begin to lose your independence.
Mm.
And the moment you become closer to finishing up on earth.
Yeah.
That's just the way
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah. I love that. Using it as a Kickstarter to
Ooh,
success into your change of habit. You're lowering the threshold of creating new habits, is what I hear you saying.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I gotta write that down. Losing mobility.
It is huge. And I
Yeah.
see that working with so many older clients. It's like they can pinpoint the time when all of a sudden they couldn't do something anymore. And they can tell you how much they wish they could do it again.
Wow.
And a- a- and so many times, right, then we get into physical therapy and all these other things trying to get back there. But there eventually becomes a point where the damage is done and you can't quite get back there. So then you have a new norm, a new threshold,
Hmm.
and it becomes functioning fully at that. How do we do that?
Yeah.
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 But the fight should be to maintain our full function for as long as we can.
Yeah. Are you an advocate for X amount of time of cardio a week,
Yeah.
weightlifting? Is there
Oof.
how would you guide people in that process?
Yeah, I think
Or
it's a good combination of both.
yeah.
I started weightlifting at a young age, and I struggle. My body type is one that struggles to put on muscle. I mean, my body's constantly going, so it was like burning up everything I was making.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got older that I got to see, oh, I actually have some muscle.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop me from getting into the gym. And what I realized was it may not just be the muscle, but it's also the bone density. All of that helps strengthen your body.
Mm.
Um, Really the musculoskeletal part of your body. So
Yeah.
there's great advantage to it. The problem comes that I oftentimes working with adults specifically is if you didn't get to exposed to it as a kid, you have a hard time connecting to it as an adult. If you didn't learn the value of weightlifting when you were younger, it's harder to learn the value because all you know is the pain. The moment you get into the gym, you have all these sore muscles, and you're like, well, is it worth it? Well, yeah, but you have to stick with it long enough and learn to understand the feedback. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm breaking down the muscle so that it can get stronger. Oh, hey, I am stronger. Oh, hey, look at how I feel because of what I've done, and beginning to connect those pathways to understanding what you're doing matters.
Yeah.
And that becomes harder as you get older.
And that it's not instant gratification with our bodies.
Yes.
I realize I've seen this in my life, and I think that what I do physically, working out, eating, all of these things, coincides with my spiritual walk. In the sense,
Yes.
if I'm not gonna work out, then usually they just go hand in hand. As
Yeah.
strong as I am physically, then my spiritual walk goes stronger, and vice versa.
That's good.
Denying the flesh, and
Mm.
and also the you're sowing seeds
Yes.
essentially into your body, and you're not going to see it 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You'll might see it about 4 weeks in of some change of
Huh.
consistent diligent work, and just know and trust the process. Just have faith, and continuing in these things because they're known levers on the physical level anyway, so that you
Totally.
can pull to see change. And that's why I love kind of a bodybuilding kind of
Yeah.
perspective of life, telling your body what it's going to do. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
agree. And then I think, like you're saying, I've never been a huge like loved cardio, but there's value in it to the point of your functionality. Like I want to continue to be mobile enough to do the things that I want to do when I'm older. And it's like when I have grandkids, I want to not be the grandpa on the couch. I want to be the one that's up shooting hoops with them. You
yeah,
know, I may not be able to do it like I did, but I still want to be able to do that,
yeah,
right? And be able to get down with them, play on the floor if I need to, right? And if that's what they want to do, then that's what I want to do.
yeah.
That's what I want to be able to do, but I won't be able to do that if I don't take care of myself.
With mobility, or how important is stretching?
Oh, man.
And
I wish I'd learned the value of it earlier on. I mean, and then learned how to incorporate it in my life.
mm,
I honestly could do more stretching and should do more stretching now.
yeah,
Uh, have I figured out how to? Well, I'd say it's a work in progress. Um, so, so don't do what I do, right? Maybe learn from what I say
yeah,
because I'm still in process too. But yes, stretching is incredibly valuable. I mean, that's the mobility, that's the helping your muscles just have that flexibility to sustain things like an injury or a fall, to better support some of the things that happen in life. If your muscles are tense and tight, you're just going to cause more damage. So the more relaxed they are, which is so hard in our world these days,
yeah,
we carry our tension in our muscles. So stretching, I think, becomes so much more important. You know, whether it's stretching or having a masseuse or a massage or some of these other things that you can do to help those muscles relax, and then being able to stretch, just key in keeping that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm preaching to myself right now.
I we all need to hear it. I love it. Back to just changing gears on making disciples of our children.
Ooh,
I'm a father as well, and my daughters are 6 and 7, and
yeah.
I look at that. How can I be the best example to
Mm,
them, lead them in the way that is right,
wow.
and not distract them, and I try not to live out of fear in that, but
Yeah.
it can happen quite easily of like, am I doing the right thing, am I a good father? The doubts and the criticisms that you or that I bestow on myself creep in so easily. So how what would you say on making disciples of our children?
You know, it's so good. I think we can only, I heard this saying, you can't lead somebody to where you've never been.
Mm,
And it's so true, I think, with all aspects of our life. Y- It's hard to help disciple somebody if you're not a disciple yourself. Um, and until you learn that, you can't really bestow that. So the extent that you're an disciple is is to the extent that you're going to be able to disciple your kids. Um, and that's a challenge, right? Because I think we can always be better at that. Um, I know that the more that I become a disciple, the more that I know my heavenly Father and sit in his presence and have and know who he is, the more that I emulate him, the more that my kids will emulate him as well. Because it's not we're made in the image of God. We were made to imitate.
yeah,
We're going to imitate somebody. And we're going to imitate those that are around us, those that have the most access to us, those that we're around the most. So we have to be thoughtful, mindful of who we spend our time with. Doesn't mean that we can't be around bad people because bad people aren't eh, bad people's a bad word.
yeah,
Uh, People that consistently make poor choices doesn't mean you can't be around them. They need help too, right? So what I'm saying is you have to be mindful of that. So balance that out. Make sure that you have in your life people that can speak to and mentor you that you can emulate. And what I say with that is look at their fruit. If the fruit of their actions says, I see God and I love what I see, then I'm going to be around that person more
yeah,
because that's what I want. I want that fruit in my life because I want my kids eating that fruit. That's
That
discipleship.
yeah,
They're
I
gonna
love that.
they're gonna see what I'm doing, whether they catch it or not, whether I speak it or not. That's the thing about discipleship. It's being in the presence. And it is about the things you say, but it's also about the things you do, right? It's about being you and who you emulate. And I think that's the bigger concept. But then intentionally, I think the other aspect of it is the heart of the Father is to intentionally spend time with us. So how do you intentionally spend time with your kids in a way that matters to them,
Hmm.
in a way that connects with who they are? So it's instead of thinking, "Hey, I like all of this. I want you to learn what I'm doing," and which is great because they should. But the other aspect of it is who are you and what are you enjoying right now? How can I join you in that?
Yeah,
Um, and how can I be me? How can I bring the presence of the Father in what I'm doing with you?
yeah,
That I think is ultimately what discipleship
I
becomes.
love that. Yeah,
Um, and it sounds so simple, but it's also very hard because our will gets in the way. There's times where I don't want to get down there, and when I do get down there because I don't want to, the Father's not seen. My selfish side is seen. My little attitude comes out, and
yeah,
that's not God's attitude at all. So I've just shown you the wrong thing, but I've also shown you how human I am. So then it gives me a chance to deal with that. Again, going back to the bad things in our lives.
hmm,
I've done something poorly. Now I have an opportunity to show humility and communicate that. Look, I wasn't the example I wanted. I want to do that differently. Give me a chance, right?
and voicing that to your children.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
so
saying
important.
I've made a mistake,
Yes.
and coming to them asking for forgiveness
Yes.
in that way. Yeah.
And create an environment where they can come to you. I remember just recently, we had a family conversation, and my middle son, who doesn't is very positive and doesn't really say it, doesn't say a ton, actually said to me, and this was powerful for me to hear. He was like, "Dad, I feel like my senior year was taken away by you being in nurse as a nurse practitioner school. I feel like there's elements of my senior year that you missed, and that hurt."
Yeah.
I was like, "Wow." That was never my heart, and I was working hard to have that not happen,
Yeah.
but I needed to hear that happen because I needed to say, Buddy, I am sorry. I know that I was doing what I was supposed to do, and the sacrifice of that was I wasn't there for you all the time. I wasn't there maybe in the moments that mattered most to you, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's all I
Yeah.
will I will that's all I could say. I don't have anything more I can say. I can't make up for it.
Yeah.
I can only do I can only be cognizant of that and work hard to connect better now where I'm at.
Yeah.
And that was important. But that was created by the environment that we created with him where he felt safe enough to say that.
I mean, that's hard to say to a parent.
Yeah.
That's not that's
I was
not an easy
impressed.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, whoa.
Yeah.
Uh,
And tell them how proud you are of
yes.
voicing your opinions in that way. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So important.
so often as a parent, you can, in an unhealthy way, minimize the feeling of that child, and
Mm,
that
yes.
just creates more unhealth where they're not going to come to you in that way, right?
True.
Yeah. All that you've done, being performance and trying to hit a high mark in all of your life, and being an example, how does that example change for a son and for a daughter? You have the joy of having both.
Yeah.
I selfishly want to know how about a daughters about daughters.
Yes.
But what
Oof.
does that example look like from your
Mm,
perspective for raising your children? And
so good. I think sitting where I'm at now, I see it differently. And I wish maybe somebody had said this to me too. Because it would have helped navigate some of the stuff. There's so much that's just said about what you're supposed to not do or not do as a parent. But I think the end result of it is we want to raise kids who are going to be um, you know, living out their faith in the way that God created them to do that. We want them to be not great kids, but responsible, God fearing, loving adults. And
mhm,
and so with that purpose in mind, I think the other aspect, specifically in looking at boys and girls, like for my daughter, I realize there's two things at play. Both, first of all, there's personality. So if they're more like you, right, they're going to learn from you because you're a lot like them, whether you're a man or a woman, they're going to learn from your personality. But then the other side is they're going to learn how to love their spouse that way. And so for my daughter, growing up, uh, she got to learn about how what she wanted her husband to look like from what I emulated,
Hmm.
and the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
What she doesn't want and what she might want, right?
Yeah.
And you get to be in that because you have that father daughter relationship. You're emulating that. You're showing that to them, and so I remember when she brought home the guy that she ended up marrying. Um, and I heard her process with it, I began to understand really quickly that she'd fallen in love and she'd given her heart to this guy. So I already knew. It was like, whoa, she's found the guy. And then as I began to understand him more and more, I understood the qualities he had that she valued in me, that I had shown her through the years that she wanted in her lifelong
Yeah.
partner.
Yeah.
Right. And I think so as a dad, I think those are the things you get to emulate. So how you live your life, how you love others, how you love your daughter, um, how you love your significant other, um, matters
Yeah.
because they learn from that. They learn what they want, what they don't want, and that's true for boys too. I think for boys even more so, you get to teach them how to be a man because you are one. And then you get to teach then there's two parts because one of my boys is a lot more like me in personality, and one's a lot more like my wife in personality. So they take different things from me, but in the end, what they get to learn too is how to love their wives or how not to love their wives, depending on how well I do that,
Yeah.
right? And then what they also get is learn how to be a man, and I think that's hugely important because those are some of the most fundamental, most life-changing aspects of our life is is who we choose to spend our life with, and how we make that choice. And so those years loving on your kids really helps form that in them.
Was there a point of a rite of passage for your sons or your daughter? You're stepping into manhood. You're
Yeah.
no longer fine today in culture, and I've seen it within myself, a lack of maturity and a matter of recognizing that there's a difference between boys and men. And you
Yes.
can be a 40-year-old man boy
Yes.
and never grow up in a mature way of loving and caring for others. Is there something that you have thought about to say
Mm,
now you're walking into manhood?
yeah. I'd like to say that I've done that well, and I don't think I've figured it out because honestly, for myself, I think I remember when I was in my 30s, I was at an event with men that I respected, and it was I remember having this moment where I was like, I still see the boy in me, and that has got to go.
Yeah.
And and I realized that I kept looking to my dad to tell me that, but the reality is he was never going to tell me that. We just didn't have that in our family tradition. And so
Hmm.
so those that have those traditions I highly value. If you don't have those traditions, traditions are great because they bring the structure in, but they're not the end all necessarily the be all too. I think um I realized in that situation, then I actually had to hear it from God the Father, and He told me that, and so we kind of I ended up getting baptized, and there I laid again. So I'd already been baptized, right? But
Yeah.
but for me that time I had this moment where we had a chance to get baptized, and I was laying down the boy because he had to go. We'd had our time, but it was time to man up on some things,
Yeah.
and that was instrumental in my life. So now as I think about it, I have a 21-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I'm with you. I'm trying to think how to best do that. I I I remember reading stories about men taking their sons out and having some ceremony and all of that, and I think that's good. I think that could be really instrumental. Um, I don't know. So I'm looking for that opportunity,
Yeah.
and I don't haven't landed on it.
Yeah.
But I think with girls too. So my daughter, I felt like for her, she got married at a young age at like 20. I think she was 20, just turned 22. Um, and really for me, it was the handing her off to another man. That was kind of the final, like, you're you're my daughter. I will always love and support you, but now there's somebody else that's significant in your life that's going to be helping you make the decisions that I was helping you make. And so I don't want to step on his toes, but I'm here,
Yeah.
right? And I think that was that transition piece for her. Um, wow. But you're right. It's different with each one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Have you come
That's
up with some good ideas, some things that you're planning?
I've only listened to like what Joby Martin spoke about and things of that nature. As far as my daughters, I don't really have a good plan. I've seen from the manhood side of things a
Hmm.
time where men, gathering men around that are close and speaking
Yes.
that future into them
Yeah.
um, is important. And one thing that's in the back of my mind from like a African culture
Yeah.
side of things is tribes will go out at whatever age and go kill a lion with a spear, and
Yes.
then they take that hide and they wear that for the rest of their life. And so maybe you take your son to Africa and have him kill something with a spear. That's
I like it. Yes,
but
that's a memory maker.
yeah. But I haven't, and that's why I ask is, you're now stepping into womanhood and figuring out how to be there. Just be present and
Yeah.
love them where they're at and guide them where they're at now, and then make a plan. I'm thinking about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost wonder too. I mean, even as you're speaking, I not that I want to devalue it because I don't think it's worth devaluing. But what I wonder is eh, if my kids live in more freedom, um, they're not as bound as I was by some of the things of life. If they just naturally transition to it, and it's not that it's not significant, but it's not as significant.
Hmm.
Sometimes I think we need these markers in our lives to really help us move past things.
Yeah.
But if so I wonder, and I don't have an answer to this. It's just me
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
now. If our children live more free than we did, they may have less need specifically for an event like that,
Yeah.
um, because they're already living that way, that it's just a natural progression to begin taking on more and more responsibility because you're not bound up by the other things that you were bound up by. I don't know. I,
Yeah.
but yet at the same time, it still feels like there needs to be some significant demarcation of that transition
Yeah.
so that you can go, so that you can take on, because I think that's the significance. All of a sudden now I'm taking on the responsibility of life as a contributing adult. And maybe there's still a recognition of for that. Wow, we've got to figure that out.
Yeah. We'll think more on it and put a plan together.
Yeah, there
That's
we
maybe
go.
we'll work on that.
There we
Yeah.
go.
For women, just, and I may be speaking out of turn, but they have a natural event that takes place,
They do.
and that, I think, a lot of the times create that womanhood sense. and
Yes.
and then and it, what the maturity is not, or what the womanhood and manhood is to me, what you alluded to is not thinking about me, but how can I be responsible for those around me.
Yes.
And that's the demarcation of
Wow.
maturity. But
Wow. Well said.
yeah.
Yes.
Navigating marriage, the ups and downs, and perspective on the long game.
Wow. It's interesting. I know we've already talked a little bit really about some of the fundamentals that I think were key for at least for my marriage, and really what I try to share in most of the men's
Yeah.
groups too is just remembering the treasure that you've been given,
Yeah.
and that your responsibility is not what they choose. Your responsibility, create an environment where they can bloom to their fullest, to be
Hmm.
their fullest potential, because they're your lifelong partner, right? Your
Yeah.
kids will come and go, and they'll start their own lives, and you'll always have an influence in their lives, but they won't be at your side all the time. You've got to, with a spouse, you have a ride or die. It's not a ride or die. It's a ride for life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think there's a different element with that where if, you can be each other's biggest fans, right? And is key. But I think then navigating the difficulty, and that's part of the blending process. You come from two different family lives, you come from two different things, and I don't know, depending on the strength of your will, depends on how much you have to wrestle with somebody else's viewpoint to get to a point where you both agree on a direction.
Yeah.
And I think we maybe bypass that by um, saying or making each other feel like it's wrong to wrestle. When the reality is you need the wrestle. I know as much as we didn't like the intense fellowship or the arguing and the fighting that we had, um, part of it has made us who we are. Part of it is who we are. We both realize we have a strong point of view, and until we wrestle through it, and until we see the value of somebody else's view, we don't want to let up our own will, our own viewpoint. Um, and so I almost feel like half of it is being in a safe community where you can recognize that neither one is perfect, and you have outlets where you can communicate safely with other people that may provide a different perspective. Some of the best help has come from me talking about a struggle I'm having with my wife with another man who maybe has a different experience and actually has the same viewpoint as my wife.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, my wife has been telling me this all the time, but then I listen to it from him and I'm like, dude, that makes so much sense. I've never seen it that way. It, then I come back and tell my wife, and she's like, yeah, I've been
Yeah.
saying that for years. Well, yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I see it now. And I think sometimes that's the important piece is not struggling by yourself, reaching out for help, finding others, engaging in the questions like, hey, we
Yeah.
were really struggling with this. What do you do?
Yeah. First be
Right?
well, I think it's a testament of being able to have community and
Yeah.
other men speaking into your life. That way you can avoid some of the landmines without blowing up relationships. And
Yeah. Yeah.
gosh, that's so good. One thing that we were talking about, you doing a house project on the roof. And it's also another thing that I see within close friends of mine is obedience to their wives.
Mhm.
A younger me would say, why would you ever, listen to what they have to say? You need to uh, do what you feel like you need to do, whether it's do the home improvement project because you're going to save money and you know how to do it and you're fully able to, and
Yeah.
really embody the brashness of being a man and not listening to your wife in that way. And as I get older and see it myself and friends, is that there's so much value in paying attention and being obedient to the heart of your wife.
Yeah.
How has that changed
Hmm.
through time of 26 years of marriage?
I think the beauty of it is you those rough edges get rounded through trials, through just slugging through it. And I think
Yeah.
and then learning to get out of your own way. I wish I'd learned some of those earlier. Um, um, but I think for each one of us, the process is to struggle through it,
Hmm.
and learn and allow those edges to become round just through your pursuit of doing life the best that you can. But then trying to learn from others. So I have to honor my son-in-law. I mean, what is he, 24? He just called us up the other day, and he had a motorcycle that he was riding. It was the least expensive route for him to have a vehicle because they decided to go down to one car and then all of a sudden realized they needed a second. And so he got a motorcycle and he rode it around, loved it. He was great at it. He's safe. He's a good driver. But my daughter, um, really at the base of her heart was always worried that he'd get into an accident.
Yeah.
You can't, he's great, but you can't control the people around you. And so I think she had this underlying worry. And he came on that phone call and said, "You know what? I decided to sell my motorcycle." He said, I need to honor what my wife is thinking." And I was like, wow, he's
Yeah.
getting it at 24.
That's awesome.
I wish I had done that.
Yeah, that's a better way. Instead of being obedient to your wife, it's honoring their wishes, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he just doesn't want her worrying like that. So he's going to honor that, even though he knows he's fine.
Yeah.
And I have to give him props for that. That is, he's doing something right.
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time today, and
Yeah.
thank you for all the wisdom that you've bestowed upon us.
Wow.
And I've been kicking around the idea of having a third person here. I think it'd be great to
Ooh.
have Sarah and have some of the power couples that I know, and
Wow.
interview how that all comes together, and maybe we'll line that up in the future. But yeah,
Sounds amazing.
yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
That's-
Oh, before we end, one thing that I do is I just as a thank you gift is I build a horseshoe for all of the guests,
Wow.
and this this is just off the hammer, meaning that there's been no grinding or machining or anything of that nature. It's all done by hand and eye, and so thank you
Wow.
for coming, and
Thank you.
yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I think what you're doing is to be honored as well. To be able to have the opportunity to voice my life has given me fresh perspective on me. So, I mean, I'm glad that it's a blessing to others, but to be honest, it's a blessing to me too. So
That's
thank you.
that's so good. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
thank you for this.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it'd be called just a 3/4 fullard shoe. Yep. But
Wow.
yeah.
I've got a spot for it already.
Perfect.
I appreciate that. That's incredible.
Thank you. And always continue trading paradigms.